Hello humans, welcome to the M Word, brought to you by Martin, that's me,
And Matt.
that's him. Sorry, I just dropped my phone then, probably got some echo on the start of the podcast, just to ruin it and look really professional. Gary, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Or Burgers, as probably more known around the island,
Yeah,
I guess.
unfortunately, yes.
Hence the surname. And I believe that came out, is your brother older than you?
No, I'm the eldest, and because my surname's Hinds.
Yeah.
Everybody, my dad, everybody, my kids are all called Beans. We're all called Hinds Beans all our lives. And the inevitable Mike Doyle, who gives everybody a nickname around the island. There was an advert on the telly for Hinds Beans and Bacon Burgers, and I became the burgers out of that. So, unfortunately, that's where it came from. I'm not a lover of them, but
all right. Burgers.
I thought I'd stick that in there now. Might look like I am, but I'm not.
I presume you don't mind the nickname though?
No.
Like nicknames? Well,
I've got to put up with them.
pretty much, yeah. So early days, where were you brought up? I'm assuming you're a good Manxie.
Yeah, good Manxie. Brought up in Douglas. Lived on just off Ballinard Road, Norwood Drive, till I was 5. And then my parents bought a house in Onken, just above the Nursery Hotel, if anyone can remember that. Where the Archibald Knox is now, there used to be a pub called the Nursery Hotel. And I grew up in the first road there, Birchley Close. 22 houses, all full of young kids.
Right. And like schooling wise, were you academic particularly, or do you couldn't be bothered with school?
If you read my reports, just said I was lazy. I'm not a stupid person. I'm quite academic, but I was bone idle at school. So yeah, my daughter, when I'm trying to nurture her through life when she was at school, my mum took the greatest of pleasure in producing one of my reports, and
Don't be like your dad.
I didn't have a leg to stand on after that.
And sport-wise, was that because then you were more interested in well, no, because then if you talk about laziness, you think, why would you want to do sport?
I would say it was a bit of both. I mean, going through a younger life, times are hard. You know, they're not like they are now. There was parents had no money, so nothing was a given anymore. And I suppose at the time I grew up, I always remember for Christmas when you were 11, you seemed to get some musical type thing like a cassette recorder, which people now won't even know what that is. And then you got a bike for Christmas when you were 12, which in them days was just a basic drop handlebar, 5-speed bike, probably from a catalogue or from something like that. And if you had any competitive spirit in you whatsoever, you headed down to the bowl to race down there. And that's the first time I competed was March when I was 13.
And did you ask for that bike, or was it just?
Yeah, I always wanted a bike. A funny little story around that time, but we all wanted bikes, but our parents couldn't really afford bikes. So I grew up in Onken, and there used to be a tip in Onken up by Cronknamona. You won't know about it. I can see throughout.
No, I do up that slip road.
Yeah. And so we go foraging around up there in the summer, trying to pull off bits of bikes and take them home and try and build something that worked out of it. And we had a little course out of our cul-de-sac. Andrew Nicholson, who grew up across the road from me, so we competed all the way through our life together. But we had a little course that came out up the pavement and into what is now Birch Hill, past where Steve Shimon lives now, and it cut down through some woodland and shot around in front of the Nursery Hotel. And these bikes that we had put together, none of them had brakes, so we would be herring through on a time. Somebody had a timer on a watch. You know, it was a very sketchy arrangement, and hair up the back lane of Birchley Terrace and back into our street. And it just shows you, even at that age, we're probably 8, 9, 10 in them days, but the competitive spirit was there, and it went from there, really.
Do you ever do any other sport, or was it always just cycling was the one you were interested in?
I played football a little bit when I was younger. I played for gyms, under 14s, but by that stage I'd started to ride my bike as well, and football just went by the wayside for me. Both my brothers played a lot of football, but no, I was into my bike from nearly the first day I rode it.
It's funny because it starts sounding like war stories, but when you talk about those early days and not have much money, that's we're not talking the 40s here either.
No.
As young as you look.
I was born in 62, so we're talking 1970.
Yeah. It's kind of hand to mouth, almost living.
Well, yes and no. I think our parents had priorities. You know, but they had a mortgage to pay. Your father went out in them days. Parents were dependent on each other. They're not so much now. The mother looked after the house and brought the kids to school and that sort of thing, and the father went out and earned a crust, and that's how it was.
Were you close to your folks?
Yes, very close. Although it was very different. My dad seemed to work so hard, and when he came in at night and we had tea, then my mother went out and worked at night. So I'm close. My father's still alive now. My mother's been passed on for 21 years, but we're still close with father now. Yeah.
And family-wise, you've got how many brothers and sisters? Or
Two brothers.
Oh, yeah.
Nigel, he's 18 months younger than me, and Stephen, he's the big muscly one who people know on the island, played a lot of football. As did Nigel, to be fair. Nigel's sporty, football, cricket, you name it. We're as we've got older, we've got a lot closer. When you're adolescent boys,
banging heads.
Banging more than heads is the least of our worries.
Yeah, right.
We hated each other, I think, but yeah, as you grow older, you just grow together.
Is that like sharing a room together then in the family house and things like that? Is that the type
I think that was beyond. We couldn't do that once day because I was the eldest. I had my own little box room, and then my other two brothers shared a room. But yeah, that was become a bit of an unlivable situation.
I was going to say, were your parents sporty at all? Because all three of you were. Did you?
My mother wasn't. No, my mum was originally from Wigan and used to come to the Isle of Man on holiday. My dad was very sporty. He's the youngest of three brothers. Reggie was an older brother, and older again was Bernie Hinds, who had a garage in Laxey, Princess Motors. He was a performance mini technician and a guitarist as well. And I've got two cousins off the back of that uncle. So my dad was very sporty though. He's captain at Onken football, brought them from the second division to the first division, and he follows sport. He was always a good footballer.
So let's dig a little bit into the cycling then. You start racing then down what we call the bowl. It's probably NSC now.
My first story is going down there when I was 13 with Andrew Nicholson. We got these new bikes for Christmas and we rode down to the bowl.
Can I interrupt? Because as well, I suppose set the scene back then, it's not cycling what we see today, is it? I guess there's probably 10 or 15 a year racing.
No, there was lots of people racing.
Oh, really?
All kids down at the bowl was under 16s.
Right.
So we go down to the bowl. It was run by Ron Killier and Jeff Quine, who I'd love to touch on a bit more about Jeff later on. And we would race down the bowl, and it's my first meeting of the likes of Steve Jocken, Eddie Cooley, John Purvis, Mark Gage. These are all iconic names when I was growing up. They were only probably 3 years older than me, but when you're 13, that seems like they're grown up, they're hairy and everything, aren't they? And they raced down the bowl, which is now the National Sports Centre, and it's not too dissimilar apart from there's no pitch in the middle. One thing I do remember though, after we'd raced, they said there's a handicap road race after this, and it's going from the QB in groups to Ballagary and back. So it's only 2.5 miles out the road. There used to be a little cafe in Ballagary on the right hand side, and I'd never been out of Douglas before on my bike, so we didn't have a clue where we were going. And somebody was supposed to look after us. As soon as we were caught, he just shot off, and that was the end of it. When me and Andrew Nicholson, we didn't know where we were going. And we hit this huge hill, which is the Ballahutchin, and we had to walk the last 100 metres of it. Yeah, and then the marshal gave us a sweet called a spangle. You won't remember any of these, but at the turn, so we could get back to the quarter bridge. And when we got back, everyone had gone.
Welcome to road racing.
Welcome to road racing. We never went back that year.
You can imagine like now, even thinking of running a race on that road. I appreciate we're talking 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
How different it was.
42 years ago, I suppose. Yeah.
So did that get the bug then, that start racing down the NSC?
We didn't go back that year, but we went back the following year, and we were.
When you're saying we, you,
me and Andrew Nicholson, really, because there's only, our street was full of loads of, but we were the keenest young lads, and we were a bit better prepared, I think, when we went back down. We're 14, we're older, and we handled ourselves a lot better, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you say handled, as in the guys who then racing,
we learned. I think we were learning more by the time we were 14, and it was something we wanted to do. So the word training came into it, and so we started to train properly. We could go out of town. We were racing properly, really. And then there was an opportunity at the end of the year to go away and race towards the end of the season. Jeff Quine was going to take a team of schoolboys to Southport, so we put our name down to go. I had paper rounds and all sorts of.
I was just going to ask if you had jobs.
Yeah. Well, we would lie about our age. So we had paper rounds from 13 really, and worked in Summerland a little bit in the summer, and we all had odd jobs, So yeah, we went to Southport and raced, and then we could watch the professionals after we'd raced, and it was just a great trip, really. Yeah.
Who else was on that?
Tony Meppen was on it. I remember that. He's the football correspondent on Manx Radio on Saturday afternoon. So Tony and his brother Stephen. There was Mike Quine, who became is Jeff's youngest son. He became probably my best friend throughout life, really. His older brother Kevin, maybe Mike Doyle, Mark Gage, people like that were all on that trip, yeah.
So set the scene for, again, I suppose non-cyclists, when you certainly obviously know the name, we know the name Mike Doyle and Steve Jochen, in regard to where they got to within the sport, maybe give the listeners an idea of the kind of calibre riders, whether they were then and where they went on to be.
Well, both of them were fantastic riders. I mean, Steve Jochen achieved the unachievable, I thought, for someone on the Isle of Man at the time. And not only did he do that just by not working, Steve left school and served an apprenticeship. And in that time, he became the national junior champion. Then he, in no time at all, when he finished his apprenticeship, he moved away to Liverpool, turned professional. He won stages of the milk race. The world famous Abdu Japarov, the Russian sprinter that you see have that huge crash on in the Tour de France, jockey beat him in the milk race in sprints. But there was no pathway through to Europe in them days, so he was just a British-based professional. He was super fast. He was like an old-fashioned version of Cav, but without that pathway to Europe.
Yeah,
so
right.
God knows what he could have achieved given the opportunity.
Yeah.
But he could also time trial. I've got a picture of him at home on doing a lap at mountain time trial, which we all know is a lap at the TT course in 1 hour 30 minutes and 12 seconds. So that's only 2 minutes slower than Rochi.
Yeah.
And that's in the 80s
No aero
with a
equipment.
bushy hairdo
Yeah.
and no tri-bars and no
Yeah.
disc wheels.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
and that's for a sprinter. So it just shows you the calibre of rider that was around even in them days.
Yeah, right.
And Mike Doyle, a fantastic junior rider, won the Peter Buckley Series, winning 4 of the events.
So that's the UK series.
The UK
for
National
best-
Series for juniors. He won 4 of the events and won the series overall, and then moved to Paris, just outside Paris, and rode for FC Fontainebleau, which was a famous club in them days. And I think Doyle would correct me probably, but he won his first 15 races in France, and they had him down as being the next Shea Elliott. And we would all ride up to Doyle's house on a Sunday night, his mum and dad's house in Annika, and wait for the phone call, see how it got on that day. And there's no mobiles, don't forget, in them days. You just stood at the phone box at the bottom of the road, wait, hope someone would ring you. So yeah, he did well, but I think I'm not too sure why he returned from France, if I'm honest. Whether it was a girlfriend thing or whatever, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was.
Sounds one for the list that we can chat to at some stage.
Well, yeah.
Good
Good luck with that one.
Good luck, lovely have a chat. So then moving into junior ranks as a racing, and I guess you're competing at a reasonable level for your age category.
I was never. At a very early age, I was well aware I was never going to make it as a cyclist. I wasn't good enough, and I wasn't applied enough either. I was fast. I was a fast sprinter, but I just didn't have the work ethic to warrant being a better bike rider than what I was. I was always well aware, and it was drilled into me by my parents. You have to start earning money, and life is all. You've got to have some income.
Especially you talked earlier that pathway as well into professionalism wasn't where now you can kind of see a path, and obviously if you have the talent and the application, there's a possibility. But
one event I do recollect quite clearly, and I did write on my little list of prompts, hastily done 30 seconds ago, is going to the Junior Tour of Ireland when I was 15. It was the very first stage race I ever went to. And Isle of Man were putting a team in consisting of Mike Doyle, Peter Kenyon Sr., Tony Jenkins, and we didn't have a 4th junior. So because I was tall, I had to go in and pretend I'd forgot my licence so I could ride. So yeah, I rode the Junior Tour of Ireland. Mike Kelly.
At 15 or whatever.
Yeah, at 15, Mike Kelly took us away, and it was an eye-opener, but it was fantastic.
I presume again that type of thing's done. It's obviously self-funded.
Yeah,
just a little
well, itself, I had £22 I'd saved up. I've got a great memory for these sort of facts and figures. I can't tell you what happened last week, but I'd saved up £22 for my dinner money from school and me working on a fish farm at the time in Baldwin. So, but I could only eat the smallest thing on the menu at the end of the day. I got spaghetti bolognese every night.
Oh, because of the cost.
Because of the cost, yeah, I only had £22. But yeah, I finished 12th overall in that junior tour. We had the yellow jersey with Doyle, and we were leading the team prize. And then on the last day, it all went wrong. Doyle punched, we had bike changes, and everything went pear shaped. So
we're going to get on to in a bit talking about when you got involved in from a managerial point of view in local cycling. And we touched on before we came on air about that team mentality, and you trying to install that into the culture here, whether it was installed or not before. But then you talk about that situation as a junior. when you went away, was that something you looked at as Dorder's got this opportunity and we're all working for the bigger cause?
Yeah.
So maybe
and
your first
we
exposure
did
to that.
really. And Mike Kelly managed the team, who was obviously a great pedigree himself as a bike rider. So, yeah, we had the yellow jersey, and we knew. But tactics have changed, haven't they? Because when Doyle went for a bike change, everybody, the Irish attacked. I went in that move to try and mess it up. But now you wouldn't. You needed back to bring it back. But in them days.
But still, that's team mentality, albeit the tactics.
Yeah. We were. I mean, I was 15. I was obviously only there to work and help the lads, and I was reveling in the opportunity, really, I suppose.
Right. And then, I presume school finished. Did you go on to further education, or was it time to get out?
No, time to get out.
Yeah.
And I had this bee in me bonnet. I didn't want to work in an office either. I mean, I managed to leave school with 5 O levels, but I didn't. I didn't want to work in an office, so I ended up going into a trade. To be fair, so I served my time as a plumber and carried on racing, and had my first venture on to ride on a track. Bear in mind, in these days there was no velodromes, indoor velodromes. It was all outdoor. So
like the bowl, not the bowl, Oncombe Park.
Oncombe Park, but
a bit more sophisticated.
So, yeah, there was no stock cars, and it was certainly a bit shorter. Yeah.
So
whereas
like
tracks now are all 250 meters indoor, super fast. You know, they were anything from 333 meters to 500 meters in these days. You know, you'd have echelons on the straights, and I'll let you explain that to the non-cyclists. But
where was that? Sorry.
Everywhere, all over the UK, there was these tracks, and I remember going away to try and get a qualifying standard for the Commonwealth Games for Brisbane 1982.
What age would you have been? So that would be
19. So I took my Mini with me track bike in the back. Had a little Mini, 300 pounds.
And when you say track bike, is that like the fixer ones we see?
Yeah, a fixed wheel track bike. I didn't have a whole load of equipment, so my own fixed wheel track bike I bought second hand off John Purvis. We talked about that earlier on. And my road bike. Went away in my little Mini. I'd already written to every track league organiser, because you used to get a BC handbook, British Cycling Handbook, in the old days. There was no online stuff. It was all.
I remember that book.
You get your handbook, look at what's on, write a letter to the organiser, ask could you ride his event, and is there any possibility you could put you up as well? That'd be quite nice. And off you went, and rode. I clearly remember what I did. I went to Nottingham on the Sunday, Coventry Monday, Leicester Tuesday, Wolverhampton Wednesday, Stoke-on-Trent Thursday, Kirby Friday, and then back to the Isle of Man. Raced in 6 track leagues. Got me qualifying standard at Leicester and got picked to the games.
In what area of that track, like discipline?
Kilometre.
Okay.
The kilometres are fast now, but in them days I think the standard was a 1:11. So I got that at Leicester.
That's
then
quick. Were you big then?
No, I was slim. I was really thin. I was, believe it or not. I'll show you a picture to prove it.
Obviously, if you see kilo, for people, that's obviously a kilometre as quick as you can go now. They're built like your brother.
Yeah. No, not in them days. We were what we were.
Yeah.
You know, there was technology wasn't there then, I suppose.
1:11's quick as well.
Well, yeah, but I won the sprints throughout all them as well, so I was quite happy to. I knew it was going all right. I knew it was fast enough as a British amateur, but it was a great opportunity. And
that was for Auckland.
Brisbane in Australia, in 1982.
So you went there then?
Yeah, I rode there. I was the only track rider, so I was left to my own devices. I had to just ride down the road to the track every day, and ended up training with the New Zealand junior team that just happened to be able to use the track at the same time. Befriended one of them who became a good friend for 5 or 6 years, really. Right. But yeah, no, I loved the experience of. It was quite surreal being asked for your autograph when you're an apprentice plumber, I'll be honest, walking around. But it was great, and one thing, moving on to when I managed for a little while, for 20 years, the Isle of Man team, we had a problem in Delhi where we couldn't get riders to go because there was going to be all sorts of issues with water and food and all that sort of stuff. And I had to try and convince Mark, Christian and Chris Worrell to at least go to Delhi, because these experiences, however trivial they seem at the time, when you get older, all you've got are memories, and memories of Commonwealth Games are just the most fantastic thing to have, for our little nation and multi-sport events. So, and that's why I still remember them so clearly now.
Is that the only Commonwealth you went to, racing?
No, I rode in 1986 as well in Edinburgh.
Okay.
A different experience altogether.
Because?
Lashing rain.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Scotland's a lot colder.
Right. Yeah.
And a lot wetter, and you couldn't even get and do any training events on the track. So, but it was still a great games. We we've always had a good laugh where we've gone anywhere. we trained hard, raced hard, but
Were there
played
other
hard.
cyclists there at that one with you?
Oh,
on the track?
oh yeah, we had a full team. Yeah, Steve
Okay.
Porter. I'm trying to remember the whole team there. Steve Porter, Andrew Nicholson, Mike Kelly, 3.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Richard Dickie
few
Fletcher,
guys.
me, Adrian Mooney
Right.
on the track. So
So, just take a step back there and say, do you think you're quite driven or motivated in that sense then? Because previously you said that you didn't think yourself was kind of suited to cycling, but then you've gone off your own back in your mini, done all these races, made sure you're the one that gets the qualifying time for the criteria to then fly halfway across the world to be the only man on the team. It's quite...
no, well, I was the only rider on the track. I wasn't the only
but
man on the
still,
team.
but still,
Still,
you're that single member going to and
to
from
do
the
that
back. So
discipline.
it's quite...
Doesn't sound too lazy.
Yeah.
It's what I mean when you talk about you racing in your early days. I was with your friend there, and it seems you must have some desire or confidence, ability in yourself to be
Yeah.
well. Actually,
I'm
I can do
a-
this. I'm going to
yeah.
prove, and
I'm
you know,
very driven.
yeah.
I'm a very driven person. I like. I've got ambition in life. Full stop. So whatever I do, I drive hard. I work hard to do it. You know. I was lazy at school, but I'm not.
Yeah,
lazy.
academically
I'm not lazy
lazy
in
with
life.
life.
I've got a really strong work ethic in life. So
Installed from your parents again.
well, yeah, it probably is. Yeah. And as I look back, I probably got the drive and acumen for various things from my mother. Got the sporting, good fun, banter type of thing from my father, and it's quite a nice combination to have, really.
Well, you mentioned there about your mum, dad would come home and your mum go out working at night. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
setting an example, isn't it?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
guess,
yeah,
so
yeah.
whether it's conscious or not.
Yeah.
So into sort of the Edinburgh.
Edinburgh
86.
is 86. Yeah.
And between those two games, was that Racing UK?
Yeah, racing.
plumbing and
Racing UK,
living your
Ireland, that sort of stuff. Really. Rode the RAS in '85.
Such a big Irish
I think
event.
84, 85, I was probably going my best,
Right.
really. I was 21, 22. Life did change a little bit after the games, because I'll clearly remember this. I hope my daughter doesn't kill me, but she's fine. I'd been away riding the RAS with an Isle of Man team. You know, it's a great event. It's probably the hardest thing you could ever do as an amateur in the Isle of Man. And it didn't really suit me because I was a sprinter, not the RAS is so hard. You know, it's 8
No,
days.
we talked to Roach a few episodes ago.
Yeah,
That's the
he-
thing
he-
he won.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll never forget that day of Roachy winning that in the RAS. So we got off the plane and I met my girlfriend Tina, and she needed something to tell me, and so we were going to have a child. So life took a bit of a change.
Obviously, no plan. Just
No, yeah, we didn't have a plan. There was no. I don't think we had
Yeah.
many plans in them days. So we made a decision that I would still race the following year and ride in the Edinburgh Games, because I'd been selected for the Commonwealth Games the following year, and then I'd stop racing. So I did. So
obviously, it was taking up a lot of time to even have those discussions.
And
It wasn't like a
yeah, and it was the money as well. You know, to race at a good level, as you'll know, you have to race away. You can't just race on the Isle of Man. You've got to race away, and because the Isle of Man, I describe this to various people. Racing, being a cyclist on the Isle of Man is like putting a plant in a pot. It will only grow as big as that pot will let it grow. As soon as you plant it in the real earth, it will grow as big as it's capable of growing. And it's the same with a cyclist. If you're broadening your horizons and racing in the UK and racing nationally and beyond, you will become as good with the support and structure that you put into it. You'll become as good as you could possibly be. So it doesn't mean you'll be the best in the world, because everybody's progression curve levels at some stage, doesn't it?
yeah.
So that's what life was like for me, I suppose. So I stopped racing when I was 23, 24. Didn't really involve myself in the sport much after that. Bought a house and changed my career. So I think with a lot...
What was the career change?
Well, I went into the fire service. So I managed to get into the fire service when I was 25. And that gave me a buzz in a different way. I can 100% see why professional cyclists and good amateur cyclists or whatever go off the rails when they stop racing, because that adrenaline rush, that banter, that crack
Structure
and
as well.
structure and everything that you have as a racing cyclist to a good level, or even not to a great level, it gives you purpose, doesn't it? And when that's gone from your life, and all of a sudden your infrastructure of friends, all that sort of thing falls by the wayside, you can be left a bit lonely, I think.
Yeah, no, we've talked to a few people that have had that experience and they've absorbed so much in that sport that when they get a long-term injury and suddenly they're not in that
Yeah.
group, suddenly they're alone. The purpose is gone, and therefore the drive's gone. And you
The
just
identity words.
the identity gets lost.
Yeah.
So do you think looking back, this fire service helped you?
Massively helped me. Yeah, because all of a sudden I was back in a profession that was full of banter. It was full of sporty people. You know, I could start riding a bike again a little bit. That definitely helped me. Definitely helped me.
And how long were you in the fire service?
Just short of 30 years.
Right, okay. And through that years, you obviously moved on through the ranks within the fire service.
I didn't go that far.
Right.
I went a couple, but
Right.
I was having too. I suppose in the early part of my career, I was 17 years a firefighter. So, but I was on a watch. I'm very practical, so I'm a practical, but I've got a lot of common sense. So being a firefighter suited me. Sitting behind an office desk would have drove me insane. That's not what I joined the fire service for. So. I was on good watches, plenty of practical experience. You know, I was confident. I was good at my job, and then I started to ride a bike a bit again. And in the end, I can remember at one stage I had that many firemen riding bikes that we had our own 10 league.
Oh right, okay.
Within the 10 league,
Okay.
but we ran it typical. Like I said before, I can always find a way of doing things differently. So everybody had a benchmark time. So say
for 10
miles. Like a PB or for whatever. Whoever got nearest that PB got the maximum points on the day. So
it's like fantasy league, basically.
Like a fantasy league, yeah. But you might be the slowest out of everybody and doing a 30-minute, 10-mile time trial, but you could get the maximum points because you've actually got your PB. It seemed a fairer way of doing it. Instead of giving all the glory to the good guys, everybody got a little bit of it. And I had some old cycling trophies from years gone by. I put new plates on them, and we did our own presentation in the mitre. Jeff was part of it all, and I think we had 12 at one stage, 12 awards to give out in the mitre, but we had such a laugh doing it. It was great.
I remember those, going to the mitre after the 10s, and I remember there being a lot of firemen. I think like people like springing to mind. I don't know a lot, but like Kevin Groom would be another example.
Yeah, Kevin Groom, Keith Lunt, all these guys, Mark Cayley. Yeah, there was loads of us. Yeah,
Cayley, yeah. So then, this is I suppose early 90s, just doing it for fun, starting to bring up your family in the fire service.
Yeah.
So what then got you involved to start getting, I say putting back to the sport, not that you were taking away, but you know what I mean, that support and helping people.
Yeah.
So that was my first interaction with you, from one racing and then starting to take people like me, good, just away your time and money to take us away racing. What drove you to do that?
Well, I've always been in love with the sport. You know, it's been even though I wasn't riding a bike in the early days, I wasn't long out of it. Probably at 92, I was riding my bike again, and even racing locally. And Cycle Week was still a big part of life, wasn't it? So I was back racing in '93. I lived on St Ninian's Road at this time. I bought the house with my girlfriend at the time, and Kirsty, and we were living in St Ninian's Road. And behind me, John Purvis and Marie Purvis lived. Marie previously was a great runner. She was Marie Noon in her earlier life, and she was a great cyclist, and John was a big support to her, I suppose. And for whatever reason, without going into the ins and outs of it, they separated. So Marie, I said to Marie, listen, we'll look after your bikes, and we'll make sure everything's sorted. And then by 94, I had a bee in my bonnet about opening a bike shop. I won't go into why, but I didn't have any money, by the way, so I just had a dream, you know. So, but I was still in the fire service, but still working hard at different bits and pieces. And then for the Commonwealth Games in 1994, which I'm pretty sure were in Canada, there was a falling out at management level and rider level with various characters or personnel involved in them days, and it all got very messy, I think, when it got home. And the outfall of that was that there was nobody left as to manage the Isle-of-Man team, etc. And I got approached about it, so I gave it a bit of thought and then said yes. So in 1995, I became what the role now is head of performance. But so I got involved with that. I'd already been on the Cycling Association from the age of 20, I think, from when I was in my earlier life.
You always had strong views.
Yeah, which is probably why I divide people, or some people don't like me, whatever. But the world's full of characters, isn't it? And I've always thought that I make decisions for the better of the sport. I've never had any vested interest. It's not as if I've got children that race or anything like that, and that's what happens in sport a lot of the times. People come in very vocal parents, but as soon as their kid packs in, they're vanished. I've never been like that, so I've always picked teams and been involved and tried to change things for the good of the sport.
I think we all, I suppose, look back in hindsight at things. Do you think, looking back, sometimes when you've got this strong view and vision that there was, in hindsight, maybe I should have been more flexible or comfortable with this is what I believed in, so
yeah,
so
maybe, yeah. I mean, I think with the older you get, you do reflect a lot on things, without a doubt. But ultimately, somebody has to make a decision, don't they? So,
no, you're never going to please everyone.
No, and it got to the stage, I think, when I took on the job and was going to Cycling Association, and they said, well, they want to see 6 qualifying events to pick an Isle of Man team for an Island Games or something like that, and the team would go away. And my first observation was they're all racing against each other here to become the first Manxman to get into the team, and that's the most ridiculous scenario I've ever seen. You don't see a football team all charge up the pitch to score the goal, do you? You need a team. And so I said, if you want me to do this job, I'll be making the decisions on who's picked. I'll be able to justify it, and I'll be the one at all the races. So that was one of the things I said is we'll put some structure in place and we'll get to all these events and do it that way. And we changed things as we went.
Much resistance?
Not at the time, to be fair. One thing around the 1993-94 time that became quite evident is that we didn't have any junior riders. Anybody. There was at one stage, I think, Roche was 18 or 19, and there was Colin Schimmel, and there was you, maybe a few people.
Probably, yeah.
And there was nobody in their 20s, and then there was maybe Dickie and a few people in their, or maybe some people in their 30s, possibly. I can't remember.
Yeah, you'd be about right, yeah.
And I thought, where's this sport going here? The only people we're bringing into the sport are kids of cyclists that are there now. So we must change things. We must organise something. So John Purvis was living behind me at the time. He was on the Cycling Association. So was I. Alec Forrest, who was the most fantastic guy. So we put a proposal as the Manx Viking Wheelers to the CA. We wanted to start kids racing at the Bowl again on a Tuesday night. And it was met with quite a bit of resistance. We wanted the CA to promote it, but at the time, maybe the other clubs didn't have the...
So yeah, again, for listeners not familiar, I suppose with cycling set up, you've got various clubs on the Isle of Man, and ultimately they feed into an association, so everyone has each of the clubs represented on the CA.
Yeah,
so really, the CA should be coordinated, as in it's about promotion of the sport.
Yeah, well, it should be, but I suppose each club has a different strength, don't they? And if a club is weak on members, or certain clubs maybe cater for the older people, they're more experienced, let's say, people, not too old. I'm one of their generation now, but other clubs might be really thin on the ground with various things.
Or helpers or whatever.
So we took it on board. And
why did it stop then? Because you said it was picking up again. Was there a reason?
Well, I don't know, if I'm honest. But when I started cycling, it was Saturday morning down at the Bowl. Whether it was actually something to do with the construction of the sports centre, I don't know. Because that took a long time to do, didn't it? Building the actual sports centre, and maybe it all dried up then. I really don't know why it stopped, but I know starting it, we managed to contact British Cycling and do this what was it? I can't remember what British Cycling promoted, but it was to get kids into sport. And we used to go down on a Tuesday night. I did talks around all the schools in assembly, and I don't know why I did that. I was not experienced in doing that, but I can remember just saying, we're setting up this thing at the sports centre. You must come down. And there was an obstacle course, went over a seesaw, you had to pick a bottle up, you had to through a hoop. Do you remember it?
Them, yeah.
So we started it in that way, and then it ran like that for maybe a whole winter. And then the fantastic woman that is Dot Tilbury got involved, and Dot and Nat and her merry band of people stayed involved, or just took it to a whole new level, didn't they? A whole new level, which is the biggest cycling league for youth riders in Europe. I'm convinced of it. It must be.
Certainly UK, I'm sure a wider field. So then you get involved with while looking at grassroots there, the experienced riders, and taking them away. So was that again as head of performance? Then was that you'd need a plan for the year? You'd have a budget if that such a thing existed back then.
Well, it was limited.
Yeah.
Well, you're right. And I suppose going through in 1998, we went to the Commonwealth. The first time I'd attended the Commonwealth Games as a manager, which was in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and the team was 3 riders: Andrew Roach, Rob Holden, and Mark Kelly on the track, and that was the size of That's the only people we had that really were of the standard to compete in the Commonwealth Games. So,
what was that experience like?
Well, I really enjoyed it, if I'm honest. I really enjoyed it. It was new. I was in at the deep end a little bit, but luckily enough with a very small team, and I befriended some great people around that time. Shane Sutton was managing Wales in these days. He became quite a well-known figure for all sorts of reasons, but he's a dear friend of mine, and I wouldn't hear a bad word said against him no matter what. But Shane. I lent on Shane an awful lot in them days. I learnt a lot off him and his team set up. And
we always want for looking around and learning off other people.
Yeah. Because I always saw in my head. I was punching above my weight a little bit. In my own head, I wasn't a great cyclist like Shane Sutton or Doyle or Jockey or anybody like that. So I had to try and learn off other people, which I did. And what was nice is they lent on you a little bit if for whatever reason I had something I could offer them, and that worked well.
And how did you find managing that team there in those games then?
I loved it. Yeah. What I learned a little bit about the sport then, and I've carried it through my personal life, is you've got to get to know them individuals as people, because different things make different people tick. And I can remember when I competed, somebody coming up to me before the start of the Commonwealth Games in Edinburgh, putting a towel over my head and telling me to start thinking about the event. It's the worst thing that could ever happen to me. I don't want to start thinking about anything. I'd rather mess around until the start line and go, because it would just do my head in. So Rob Holden was a shining example, an unbelievably talented bike rider, a great climber, just a fantastic rider who'd moved to the island in the late 90s when he married Rachel. But an ex-professional milk race, King of the Mountains rider, riding people like Robert Miller off his wheel in them days, and yet had such little confidence in himself. It was unbelievable. And I'd never experienced anything like this, really. I was more than confident with no ability. Yeah. So, and he was the opposite. To the extent I can remember him knocking on my door the night before the road race saying he couldn't ride. There's too much pressure. And there's a lot of pressure when you ride for the Isle of Man, believe it or not, way more than there is riding for England, because the whole nation comes to watch. So every other sport comes to watch the cycling event. Whereas if you're riding for England, it's only cyclists. Nobody else wants the netball or the football or whatever. Nobody of them are coming to watch you. So I learnt a lot at that games. Andrew Roach was probably at his best in '98, and had a chance of medaling. We thought. So did Rob. Roachy crashed in the time trial, which was so unfortunate. It was so hot on the day. There was a big descent and a left-hander, and Roachy's tub rolled, and he was off into the rails. So Stuart O'Grady was the same, rider for Australia. So, but I learnt an awful lot at them games that I think I carried through, really.
Yeah, it's interesting. Suppose maybe again you look up at characters like Rob, or not characters, but people like that, and then when you get to know them, you kind of, I suppose from a distance, you look at a super talented rider, probably looks super confident on the bike. And when you kind of get under the bonnet, you kind of see.
Yeah. And me and Rob have been really close all our lives, really. Even though we see a lot of each other now, but the day after he knocked on that bedroom door, he only went up the road and finished 6th in the road race. There's break of 5 had gone early doors, and we didn't have anyone in it. But Rob snuck away. Well, in fact, he wasn't 6th. He snuck away, got caught 200 metres before the line, and finished 11th, I think. But Rob always had this unbelievable ability, but lack of belief, I think.
And you at this stage, well, 2 things. One, to go right back, because we have to talk about it, because if anyone who knows you, this story always comes up from Cycle. Well, which one? From Cycle Week. So Cycle Week's the week-long event that certainly used to be professionals will come over, countries will come over, bring teams over. So it was back in the day. Certainly Cycle Week was massive, and then there was a number of races that went on throughout the week. And one of them was the Kerwin Clegg, who I presume was an old. I don't know. What's Kerwin's background?
Kerwin Clegg was the original organiser of Cycle Week.
Okay.
Way back in 1930 something or other, six maybe, I'm not sure. And he ran Cycle Week all where he was. That guy is a hero. He brought over people like Eddie Merckx and Fausto Coppi, all these great names going all the way back. He brought them all to the island. The Isle of Man International Cycle Week was the biggest week of cycling, certainly amateur-wise, in all of. It was biggest in the UK until it folded in 2003. Everybody looked forward to it. You'll still hear people now talk about it and how it was. Why can't we?
Well, we're just about to.
So
one of the races.
But that's who Kerwin Clegg was, and then
Yeah.
Mike O'Hare took over for 15 years, and he took it to another level. And Mike O'Hare is such a dear friend of mine. It been instrumental in my life, really.
Right. In what ways?
People always ask me why I was such a big friend of Mike's. When I was 19 and picked to go to the Commonwealth Games, I didn't have any money, and we were apprentice plumber. So was Steve Porter, and he was in the same boat as me. We had no money, we had second-hand bikes, and we had, not a lot to go with, really, and he was the same age. And I can remember Mike O'Hare saying, what was I doing one night? He wanted to see us come down to the house just before we went. So we went, me and Steve went down. And Mike O'Hare was there with Brian Nelson, his best friend, who was the main sponsor of the Manx Road Club for years, who passed away a little while ago. And they presented us with a pair of wheels each, hand-built wheels. Must have cost them £200 each in them days for these wheels for a pair. And I thought it was the nicest thing I'd ever seen. So,
Just built that relationship from there.
Yeah, and I've never forgot it.
Right, yeah. Well, it's so small things back, just those small helping things along that path that to remember. So anyway, more importantly, the story.
Am I skirting around this?
Yeah. So the Kerwin Clegg was a race, part of Cycle Week. I think if I recall, it was on the Wednesday. Yeah. It used to be round it's round the Southern 100 motorbike course, but the other way, if I recall. It was handicaps. That means there was start group depending on what ability you were, really. And obviously the pros were off at the back. And handicapped over 10 laps or whatever it was. It was an event. It was one of the main. You call the Blue Riband in the TT, but it was one of the main. Well, outside is probably the Friday racing, which was the TT course. It was probably my experience was it was probably the next biggest one of those.
Well, originally it used to be on 15 laps of the Williston course, believe it or not, and it was called the Manx Arms Handicap. And then, but they changed it because there was two big handicap races on the Williston circuit, and they wanted to move it down south. Mainly because the officials all had to be in Castletown by 7 o'clock at night for the Castletown Kermesse. So they moved it to the Southern 100, and in the early years it was the same way as the Southern 100. So it went round the same way the Southern 100 goes round. It was 15 laps, handicapped. The third cat, juniors, third cats, everything went off. I think at the time I'd been a second cat rider, I was. But it all came together with about 2.5 laps to go. I'd say the French and everybody were there, the British pros were there. Now I knew I was fast because the year before was the first year it had been held on that circuit, and I finished 4th. I had a friend who was leading me out, but he died a death 500 metres from the line, left me in the middle of nowhere. So and I got pipped on the line, but I still finished 4th. So I knew what to do the following year, and my good friend Dennis Lightfoot, who now lives in Australia, he was a pro. I might have been riding for the Manchester Wheelers in these days, but I remember we came out of the last corner and there was a couple of guys that kicked and there was a gap open, but then they hesitated because it was still 500 metres to the line. And Dennis dived to the left and I dived to the right. And as we were moving forward, everyone came back. So I knew I'd had the better of Dennis. And I'd walloped him a few times in the past. So it wasn't quite a walloping, believe it's half a wheel. But So I was made up because I was at my depth really, as in compared with pros and first cat riders. But I knew I was fast enough. So
anyone who knows Gary, and it's a great story. It's obviously a great race to win as well. It's a story
I'm sure I'll tell a long version of it.
Sometime. No, it's good. It's a good one. So sorry to go back to more or back to sort of 98, 99, and again helping the Manx team again. I guess you're starting to see cycling move on from, because that grassroots is starting to come up from the quality starting to. There's more depth.
Cycling in general was moving on. Chris Boardman winning the Olympic gold, I think, in '96.
Oh, was it that late? I thought
it might be '92. Yeah. But cycling was moving forward. The velodrome was being built in Manchester, and that was changing. And then people, what was his name? The Kilo rider that won the first Olympic.
Quealy.
Yeah, Jason Quealy in Sydney won the first.
Yeah, that was 96, I think.
I think it was 2000.
Oh, was it? Yeah, no, sorry, yeah.
So anyway, so you can see how now I'm getting towards modern day life. If memories go,
No, it was better than mine. Yeah.
I won't even know why I'm here later. So things were changing. Money was coming into the sport. I think Sport England had already had this, always had the vision that the amount of funding given to sport was dependent on world medals and Olympic medals. And there's so many medals to be won on the track and 2 to be won on the road. So they concentrated on the velodrome, and more money came into the sport, more structure came in, and more money that comes in, the more officials you've got, the more structure you've got, and it's a self-perpetuating situation. So I can remember having a conversation when we started talking about Commonwealth Games, 2002. I think we were in Manchester, and people were saying, well, why are we spending so much money going to the Commonwealth Games against these big nations? And we had to make a decision. We either hang on to the shirt tails of these big nations, or we just knock it on the head. And I was always one for saying, we can do this as a small nation, but we have to change how we do things.
Right. And what kind of changes are you thinking?
Well, when it got to around 2006, we had all of a sudden we had these great juniors coming through. British Cycling had set up the academy, and the first people on that academy were Mark Cavendish and Christian Barley. So fantastic, here we are with an academy of 6 or 8 riders, and 2 of them are from the Isle of Man. So he was the benefits of the National Sports Centre coming through, the first people to shine.
It's amazing when you look at the timeline. It does seem like not a long time, but if you sat in a room and saying, like, we've got a 6-year project and that to get a couple of people on in 6 years, it's so far down the road. A lot of people don't have that vision and won't commit to that. So I suppose to see that start to flourish must be very rewarding for yourself, for John Purvis back then, all that work from those early days.
By this stage, my life had been taken over by, although I was still in the fire service, and I was still, so by this stage we'd opened up a bike shop, so time was quite minimal, but it drove me no end. It completely encapsulated my life, really. I was every night working on this, trying to see how we could do things. And the next Commonwealth Games were, 2003 was the Island Games in Guernsey that I know we touched on earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
And by that stage we had these new junior riders starting to come through. So I thought, right, well, we're going to pick a team here. And I've been going away an awful lot by this stage. Every 2 or 3 weeks we were taking teams away. And we had these great junior riders, so I wanted to adopt a junior policy into selection of teams. So at least a minimum 1 junior would be in our senior team for the Island Games, if not 2, maximum of 2, because otherwise the balance would be tipped towards inexperience and youth. You'd got to have a massive level of experience. So we picked our team. I had a lot of
flack,
for want of a better term, heated debate. What our team consisted of. Andy Roach, who had never lost a time trial, and I heard in the podcast last week, he's never lost a time trial. He's that guy's been inspirational on the Isle of Man for all his life. And Elliot Baxter, who was on top of his game, mountain biking, but on the road as well. He's always been a phenomenal bike rider, full stop. Graham Hatcher, who was an unbelievable team worker, really. And I always picked Graham for things because of his work ethic towards the team. An unsung hero, really, in his heyday. And then Cav and Christian. So, I got some flack for that, as you can imagine. Cav was quite...
Well, it's funny you say, as you'd imagine. It's easy to say...
Can you remember Cav at 16?
Well, yeah, maybe, 50. But, he was still quick, though. He was still... He could time trial, and even back then, he still owes maybe just lost a couple of time trial records. So there was talent there, albeit there was the outside perception of what he just talked about himself.
There's a funny little story here, which he'll kill me for, but he will and he won't. I always used to go to the games early. I'd drive there generally with a big van full of 30 odd bikes and get there a day or 2 early, put them all together, secure some form of store, so everybody when they rolled in were ready to go out for a ride that day. And I was on, of course, Cav's stuff hadn't turned up by the given time he was supposed to be there. I was working a night shift, I think, at the fire station, and then I was going to get on the boat and drive to Guernsey, basically. So I had to ring him midnight, no sign of the bikes. Burgers I'm so sorry, I forgot they're in the back of my mum's car. Anyway, they turned up at like 6 in the morning so I could get to the boat. And drove down to Guernsey, and I was putting them all together. And I looked at this stuff that Cav had put in the van. He had a time trial bike, and I thought, what on earth have you put in here? So, yeah, but you bear in mind he was 16, so, and quite vocal Cav all his life, hasn't he? In a lovely way.
Yeah,
we all know him,
yeah,
and we
yeah,
love him,
yeah.
don't we? So we had a 10-speed Campag Nolo time trial bike, but he had a 6-speed disc wheel to go on the back.
Yeah, so that's different number of gears to the
so
equipment, basically.
So for the non-cyclists out there, this is never going to work in a month of Sundays. The chain will run on one, but one click of it's a mile out. So I had to ring him up. So you've made a mistake here. No burgers. He said it's fine. It works on 3 gears, but it looks good, doesn't it? I bought it off Brian Tate. So I put this thing together, and he finished third in the time trial. Roach had won it, and then one of the top Guernsey guys was second, and I think Cav was third. So and he was 16, you know, and then come the road race. He wanted to. What am I doing in the road race? And I said, well, you're here to ride for Roachy. That's your job, is to sit with Roachy. If he needs to go across a move, if he punches, you need to get him back on you, not to move from his side. And we had to start firing. We had a game plan anyway, which worked a treat. So we won. I think we were first, second, and fourth in the road race against some good riders. You know, there were some GB riders riding for other nations. Cav crashed, broke his rear mech. Nobody rode Campag in Guernsey, so had to get one shipped in overnight. But because I was involved with the bike shops, then I've got contacts, so I got mech shipped in and got his bike sorted out. And his day was the criterium on the last day. So I said, everybody's here for you now, Cav. The pressure's on you. You can do this. We'll pop somebody in that moves early on in the race, and then with a lap to go.
Was he happy to take that lead role?
Yeah,
at that age?
And Roachy will be pulling up beside you with a lap and a half to go, something like that, and tap you on the backside, and you have to follow him and not move off him. And he nearly lost it, to be fair. What's his name from Jersey?
I know the guy. Yeah, was it Spence? Wasn't Spence?
No,
was
it wasn't Spence. It was his big mate. I can't remember his name now. But he had his hands in the air, thought he'd won it, but everybody underestimated how fast Cav can be over 30 metres. So he just squeezed under his arm, won it, and.
There's a great picture somewhere, isn't there, of him?
Yeah. It's on the Jersey wall. Even though we were disappointed at the time, he's the proudest man in the world to be bit by an inch from a 30-stage winner of the Tour de France, isn't he?
Yeah.
So it was.
What was Cav's character like back then?
Boisterous, I'd say, mischievous, confident, super confident. He was so fast. I used to think I was a fast bike rider when I was younger, you see, and I was going to the games, and what we'd always do is find a decent coffee shop somewhere, ride there, try and turn it into a Manx coffee shop, give him a tracksuit and a flag and all this, and pin it up outside. You know, none of us really liked wearing our tracksuits at the best of times. Don't tell the organisation. So and then on the way back we'd say, right, we'll go for the sign down here, and I'd take off thinking, and Cav would just sail past me, gone, and I thought, Jesus, he's fast, isn't he? Unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it in my life. And who would have thought he'd carry on going faster and faster all his life to be what is effectively the fastest road sprinter I think the world's ever seen. If I'm honest, in his day, I don't think anyone's ever been faster.
No, and he kind of just changed the sport in so many ways, didn't it?
Yeah.
I think we're in that. I guess he's in that stage in his career where I'm sure it frustrates him, where people are talking about, and they probably have for years now, the end of the career and things like that. And there just seems to be this. I don't know whether it's sports in general, when someone's getting towards the end of a career, because we all do in some format, but it just seems like it's all negative. And I think only once his career ends, there'll be I think a lot of people obviously do appreciate, but there'll be a real appreciation for what he's achieved. I'm sure what he still can achieve. I'm sure. Yeah,
and we all have who knows who's right or wrong. I look at Cav now, and I think you can see he's got the heart of a lion there. He still wants to win. He still wants to race. He can't. It's been his life, and it's his dream, and he lives for riding his bike, doesn't he? And his body isn't letting him do it. And he's had his fair share of ailments and crashes and so on and so forth. But he's 35 now, and you're not as fast at 35 as you were. But his brain hasn't gone any slower. So
I'd love to have a conversation with him about what he sees, even if he wants to race and he can race, because the talent is. I remember I was watching the Paris-Roubaix a few years ago, and the one that Sagan won, another world fame, and he was up that front end of that, and I think there was a crash a couple of wheels in front of him. And of course, in the Paris-Roubaix, which is over cobbles, once there's a split, there's no chance. But that's one of the hardest bike races around, and what many people will consider not Cav's forte. Although I think a lot of people, bystanders of cycling, maybe don't appreciate the other skills outside of just sprinting that he has. It'd be great to see the last couple of years of his career, because inevitably will come to an end. Him maybe looking at those opportunities, and people, not seeing him just as a sprinter, which sadly some do, because there's so much more to it than that.
Oh, absolutely is. Yeah, and he's a leader of men, isn't he? I remember we went to we took it when we were in the Commonwealth Games in Delhi, and Cav turned up. Just took over really, because he gave belief to the team. We might all be here, we might be electricians and so on and so forth riding in the team, but we all had to do a job. And
so talk us a bit about Delhi then. So that was 06.
Delhi was 2010.
Okay.
Melbourne was 2006, which was unbelievable. I mean, that for me was one of my best games. My good friend Mike Doyle came along. Doyle, by his own admission, he's had a few troubles in his life, and he's beaten his demons, and I'm so proud to see it as well, because there's not many people can have as many demons as Doyle has had. But I always was a firm believer with Doyle that cycling needed him, and he needed cycling. Well, we all do. It's our sanctuary, isn't it, at times? He came as our coach to Melbourne, but you had to have a plan in Melbourne, because we had this super fast young kid in Mark Cavendish, but there's a lot of other nations had some unbelievably fast riders. So cycling can be a little bit like this. It's very tactical, but you have to pull favours sometimes. And I've made a big friend in Shane Sutton over the years, and Shane was by this stage the elite performance coach for England at the Commonwealth Games. And we knew we had the fastest guy in the race, but we had to be in the right place at the right time with Cav, and we needed. Australia had this rider called Kim Kirchen, who was the world kilo champion. So you can imagine how fast he is. Mm-hmm. He's under a minute for a kilo. So
beating your 1:11.
Well, just by a lap. So we needed Cav in the break, but we didn't want Kim Kirchen with him. So we had to try and work out how we're going to do this, and luckily enough, I think a break had gone early on in the scratch race on the track, and Kim Kirchen was in it I think his name was Kim Kirchen. He was in the move, so the last thing we needed is that to go away. But fantastically, Cav had a lot of friends in Geraint Thomas riding for Wales, and a lot of other riders. So that as that move got brought back, with the help of a few other nations, then Cav attacked. And the other Australian went with him straight away, because Cav was the man to watch. So the other Australian, followed by a Scottish rider, a Malaysian, a Kiwi, so on and so forth, went with him. Of course, Australia aren't going to chase it, because they've got a rider in the move. Neither in New Zealand, neither are our friends, England and Wales, hopefully. So it worked. The whole thing worked, and
they gained a lap.
Yeah, they gained a lap, and then magically Rob Hales from England hit the front. He was already lapped down, made no difference.
So when you gain a lap, you get a load of...
no, you don't get points.
Oh, it's
just
not
a
points.
Lap ahead.
Yeah, that's right.
You're just a lap ahead in the scratch race. So the sprint was always going to be down to these 5 riders. Rob Hales hit the front, and I think Cav was on his wheel, followed by the Australian, followed by somebody else. But Cav was so full of confidence. It was just incredible, and one of the most emotional sort of days of my life, I think.
Yeah, I bet. And how did the other guy? I presume there was other Manxies in that race.
Yeah. Mark Kelly was riding for us at the time. Mark rode well. He finished. He finished top 10, which was a good ride, a really good ride. He rode really well in the points race as well. I think he finished 5th in the points race, but he was up there or thereabouts at one stage. A good rider. He rode it his way, and he put a lot into that. So and then young Johnny Bellis, who was 17, came as a rank sort of junior. Really.
What was he like for talent? You spoke to Johnny at early stages of
Johnny.
A year ago.
Johnny was a great bike rider. So I'm inspired by Johnny really to see his life's turned on its head because of his awful accident. He had the world at his feet really, riding at Pro Tour level. So for the non-cyclist, that's like playing Premiership football, isn't it? And then having an accident and be lucky if you can turn out for Onken. You know, it's
lucky you can get out of bed.
yeah, exactly. I mean, what happened to Johnny was just I'll never forget that, because we were working at the fire station at the time, and his dad, we'd heard Johnny had an accident. His dad had flown straight to
his dad was
his dad was a fireman with me, big John. So yeah, awful times, you know. 3 months in a coma, and but he's turned his life around. He's engaged again. He's had a few other opportunities that have fell by the wayside a little bit, but he seems to be on the right path.
Resilience, from chatting to him, the resilience of a guy who, in theory, if you apply today's rules, he was at Team Sky, he was at the biggest team in the world at that stage, was with Saxo, and was just about to, you know, start a full-fledged, or, you know, was just into full-fledged career, and it's just swiped away. And a lot of people could, I use the word sulk, or you know, drag it around as baggage that it's a lost opportunity, but you never got that impression from him. He was just like, well, shit happens, next.
Yeah. Well, you have to, don't you? Well, I mean,
no, you have to, but a lot of people don't.
Do you think it's that sort of coming from a sporting background that you do that? Because not all your races go to plan, do they? Not sometimes you can have some horrendous setbacks in life, can't you? But
but
he's lucky to be alive.
It's not personality and how you treat it, because sport and setbacks happen, but you can see both sides to how some people can treat it and some people can't.
I think, and I'm sure Christian will mind us talking about it, when he kind of, I think his opportunities that he lost have haunted him in many ways, and dictated things. I think he'd openly admit, I think he really much talked about that, where Johnny, not saying either right or wrong, but Johnny just seemed like, oh well, it happened, next, what's next, and moved on.
Maybe, don't forget,
but maybe manifested in other ways for Johnny.
And it also, but it changed Johnny's personality completely. You know, the injuries Johnny sustained completely changed his
It's a different situation, really. He was probably close to death, so not being able to ride a bike is probably not that important when you could actually not have been around.
And he gave it a good shot to come back as well, and got to a good level. He gained a Commonwealth Games standard again, and came to the games, and just couldn't progress any further than that. Really, his body wouldn't let him do it. I know, I would his head probably to an extent. So you have to rethink your life and move on.
So before we get into Delhi, I just want to I want to just again go back, more self-indulgent, having raced and been pretty poor in the early 90s, and just your views on Anthony Aspel at that age, bike-wise.
Well, I have no other views really.
No,
Anthony was a phenomenal bike rider. He had so much talent, didn't he? His dad probably didn't help his career. It's fair to say, without going into any great.
His dad was fairly, fairly pushy.
Too pushy, and to be fair, didn't have any great views on anything. As far as I'm concerned, you know, he should have let Anthony progress in his career, and don't think just because you rode a bike in your life doesn't mean you've got the best ideas in the world. Have you? Should have just let him go down the path he was at. I mean, to win that Junior Tour of Ireland, they still talk about that in Ireland, and the older guys that were involved in them days when he rode the Junior Tour of Ireland. Bear in mind his teammates were David Miller and Charlie Regalis, who were both World Tour riders and fantastic bike riders, weren't they? And Anthony was a team leader and won the whole event. And the folk in Ireland still talk about him. Now, how's that little Anthony Aspel from the Isle of Man doing? You still see him about, don't you? It's
doing the stock
it's one of them talents that just.
That's why I like talking about him.
I
got a lot of time for Anthony. Used to train with him. He was a few years younger than me.
And he's not interested either in coming back out on a bike, but I've tried and
talked. So
he's not having
every time I bump into him.
He's not having it, is he?
No, but unbelievable. Again, I often, any cyclist I see coming through now, I always go back and almost use him as a benchmark of, although he never made it for various reasons, that was a talent that in a different environment or a different time, because he got onto, I know he rode the Europeans, I think youth Europeans, so pathways weren't there, but he'd kind of jumped that pathway and was getting seen on the bigger. I do.
It's funny when you reminisce back on things, because even though how old are you now? I'm about. So it's only a decade or a decade and a half between us. But when you're younger, you feel like a responsible adult to younger people. And I can remember when Nicky Hall passed away.
Name I not heard for a while.
I know, but I've always thought I was a lot older than him, but now when you look back, you're not, are you really? you're a decade or a bit more. And a lot at that time there was a lot of banter, but a lot of I don't know. It was so sad with when Nicky passed away, and then you know with Chrissy Harrison and Colin Schimmel.
There's another talent. You know, two of them. Yeah. But I mean, Chris Harrison. You know, obviously the guys that own Eurocycles through the family there, and Mark's obviously still rides. Chris was just unbelievable.
And the nicest guy you could ever want to meet. I remember taking a team down to Essex to race down in Essex, and Chrissy was with us. I think he was the British student champion at the time, if there was such a thing. Or it was, road race champion, wasn't he? All the British universities type of thing. Yeah, no. I
remember hearing stories of him turning up at time trials in the UK at uni. He'd be sat under a tree studying, and then literally jump on his bike, ride a time trial, be up with the top guys in the UK, put his bike away and start studying again, and just so talented, so laid back, such a nice guy. I didn't know him super well. He's a few years older than me, but again, just a super talented.
It's funny how you have to do things like that, doesn't it? You just reminded me of when I was a kid. I had a paper round for Fargers in Onken, and the papers were late in one Sunday, and I was supposed to be doing a 10-mile time trial around the Clips course, and so I set off on my paper round, but I was running way late here, so I had to put the Daily Mirror bag under a tree in Ballycrink, go and ride a 10-mile time trial, and then come back and get my paper bag and carry on. And they were all whinging why the papers were late. You just reminded me of that, but just hiding something under a tree.
So, Paul Collin as well, another good talented rider as well. So 06 then, Delhi, taking the island. Obviously, Cav's pretty much world stage now.
I think.
Did you need to convince him to come? Was that something he wanted to do?
No, he wanted to do it. Cav always loves riding for the Isle of Man. He loves it. He doesn't have. He would do it at the drop of a hat.
Even you think about, because I know again, I think before we came on, we chatted about Delhi, and it's the security questions. I guess generally it was 40 degrees different, and then let alone the food and the water, etc. So I'd imagine just there's so many challenges in that. Let alone then you've got a guy on the world stage, so your eyeballs are on everyone.
Yeah.
Imagine that applies pressure to the team. Like you said, they're plumbers and doing their day job, and 3 days later they're in another country riding for one of the best sprinters in the world.
It was a funny thing, the games, and it to me it highlighted the real Mark Cavendish. He'd flown in from riding the World Championships, I think, in Melbourne, and had to go and pick him up at the airport on the bus. And Cav, I'm not saying I could clinically diagnose him, but he's definitely a little bit ADHD, and he wouldn't stop ringing the bell on the bus, and the armed guard was going a bit nuts and all this sort of stuff. So anyway, we get into the village, and I had to go to various technical meetings before the competition starts, and I befriended the Ugandan team manager, who happened to be sat next to me and didn't understand much English, so they kept leaning over and saying, what is the meaning of so I say, well, you've got to go and get your bottles, your bidons from this. I'll take you. Come with me. I'll show you. So the Ugandan team sort of befriended us a little bit, and they were in awe that Mark Cavendish, this global. I think I don't think he'd won a stage or two by now. I'm not sure, but he was world famous. So, and as you can imagine, these little black Ugandan riders. They would all hang around the food hall in the entrance, waiting for us to come down, and we'd come down, and but they were all teeth and eyes. So they would follow Cav round wherever he ate. They'd eat.
All right, okay.
And then you had to eat on big, like the desk here, on big banquet tables, and all you get is all the Ugandans at one end, and they'd just be looking down the table at you like this.
The superstar down the end.
And I thought it was lovely because Cav was really, really patient and courteous with them. And then at the end of the games, I said to Cav, what are you doing with your kit? You're sponsored by every company in the world. You're not going to be walking out of here in high-tech trainers and a kukri top, are you? What are you going to do with it all? He said, I don't want it. I said, well, can we give it to the Ugandans? So we got them round, and all these Ugandan kids were walking off in Cav stuff, little rucksacks with Mark Cavendish Isle of Man on the back, and they had it for and it was just a beautiful thing, to spend time with these underprivileged, for want of a better term, young cyclists that didn't have a lot, and that was given out to them, and it was just, and I've seen that side of him when he rode for Quebecer, Dimension Data, and how much he got out of what he did, what he gave back, and going down. And I remember him telling a story of rolling a ball to a kid who was just sat on his haunches at the side of the road with a stick in his hand, and Cav rolled the ball to him, and the kid rolled it back, and Cav rolled it back, and the kid rolled it back, and Cav kicked it, and the kid got up and kicked it. Before you know it, it was that living to play. You know, if you play something, you're alive, aren't you? And Cav got a lot out of that, and that's a side to Mark Cavendish that people don't know, I think.
No, I'm sure. For you, so you talk about those early years, sort of being a manager and maybe not believing in, let's say, your own ability or feeling you're at your depth. At this stage, you've got a reasonable amount of experience from a performance side and running a team.
Yeah.
How did you feel like then, like we say, we bring Cav into that environment where, again, you're obviously older and there's a maturity side there, but was there how did you find, not that we're saying the problem with him, but just bringing this, it's a change in dynamics, I guess, because it's not plumbers and decorators.
It is, and I came back from the games with quite strong views on that we needed to move forward. We needed an investment into the sport, really. I've always been of the opinion that as a sport, we are the biggest and strongest and most successful sport on the island. Apart from, you include motorsport and shooting and perform really well, but we're constantly achieving a world, national, international level. And how are we going to progress this now? We've got the juniors, we've got the schoolboy set up, the DOT have taken it to that fantastic level, but we didn't have anything above that, really. All our riders were going off island or they were coming out of DOTS League. So I put a business plan together and approached a few big companies. I really didn't have any expertise in this, but I was just doing it because I was driven. And I approached microgaming. They were new to the island at the time. E-gaming was big but frowned upon to a lot of the uneducated, to think that we were welcoming gambling on the island, so on and so forth. So, but when you understand the company, they're not like that at all. So I put a business plan together, and I went to have a chat to them. And my mission statement really was that I wanted to try and take a raw schoolboy over a 3-year period to win a Commonwealth medal. That was my plan in 2007. So I didn't know how I was going to do that, but I had to have some form of a statement, and I had to have a budget. I wanted to bring in Mike Doyle. I needed, we were doing this and paying all our own way. We all were. It was costing us a fortune, and we didn't have this much money to burn either. So I needed a budget. I needed an expense account for Mike. We needed, at least if we were taking teams away, to receive something that would make us not spend money. £50 a day would do it, because your phone bill was that big half the time, as well as using your own vehicles. So after about 4 months, I'd say, of sitting down with Microgame, and they decided they would come on board with a 3-year plan. It's quite a considerable amount of money. X amount first year. I won't go into facts and figures, but X amount first year, second year, and then a bigger sum in the third year, which was the year of the Delhi Commonwealth Games. So we put all this together, and we started to compete in a number of stage races. We had proper events lined up. We had a plan. We had a team. We'd launched Team Isle of Man, because I'd seen that within Sports Council there was a thing called elite team funding that we were never getting any of. It was going to Vagabonds and Douglas all the time, and I couldn't work out why. And I called a meeting with the Sports Council to see why was this happening. They said, well, you're an association, you're not a team. Well, we'll soon change that, won't we? So we became Team Isle of Man, and we brought in Terry Dolan as a sponsor. We had kit, we had, the riders were buying their own bikes, but they were getting it at trade, which meant quite a comprehensive saving. So, and we set on that road, and for 2000. From the end of 2007, 8, 9 and 10, we grew as a team. I have to move that. We grew as a team, and we achieved our mission statement when Mark Christian won the bronze medal in Delhi on the track.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So he was a schoolboy in 2007, and he won the bronze in the Commonwealth. So
it's good. Yeah.
Also, which was, I wasn't professional in any way, shape, or form, to sit down and do debriefs with global companies. I wasn't experienced in it, really. So one of my close friends from my young life, Craig Wollstonecroft, I don't know if you know Craig, he owns MM&C, mainstream media, etc. I can't remember, it probably changed the name a little bit now. very, very successful. And he'd always said to me, "Is there anything I can do? Give me a shout." Well, a lot of people say that to you, but they don't expect you to turn around and say, "Actually, there is." So can I have a meeting with you? So I sat down and asked him would he consider coming on board and sponsoring the Isle of Man team. But I don't want any money off you. I just want your expertise in how to monitor this and how we're growing and help us grow it. And he did, and it was the best thing we ever did, because at the end of the year he could sit down and demonstrate that company had X amount return on their investment, and it worked a treat. It worked a treat, and Craig is I'm indebted to Craig for his help throughout that period of my life. And
it's often a situation like that, surrounding yourself with, you've got your skill set and your ability, whether that's a leader to bring the people together to maybe get your hands into the team tactics and things like that. But if you're not, let's use the word finances, probably not the greatest term, but if that's it, it's bringing other people's, being able to identify those skill sets and bring them in to provide that support. Yeah,
and I suppose at the time we had a great, and I still think it's lacking now, to be fair. I've worked, I've done my 20 years in 2014, 15. But I think there's something lacking here now. There's no umbrella to capture all these great riders that are going all over the place and not quite making it, and they come back to the island and just pack in. And we're better than that. I don't know why. I don't know why that's still there, really. But we could touch on that maybe later. But at the time, this worked really well. And Microgame has stayed with us for probably 5 years, I'd say 6 years, and are still a huge supporters of the sport. And the merry band of men there, they became very close friends. And
To what was I going to ask about? Talking about, I lost my train of thought. So okay.
One thing I would touch on.
I was going to mention about.
I was going to talk about.
I was going to ask about Mark Christian because his name came up.
Oh right, okay, yeah, go on then. Yeah.
Just obviously, you got bronze there as a rider coming through, and his talented. I mean, I can't believe that's like 11 years ago now.
Isn't it amazing?
And he's still racing now, talent-wise. Seems to me,
he's 30 next week, 2 weeks, isn't he? I got the invite. But he's just. He's been like, it's like being in football the top scorer in the championship and not quite getting into the Premiership, isn't it? And Mark's been like that. He should have had some rides.
100%. Just you kind of look and kind of just always feel like just for whatever reason, not for want of talent, want of his application, the type of guy he is. Just why isn't that? It seems.
I remember talking about this with Cav one day, and the problem is with a lot of these Pro Tour teams now, they pick teams. A lot of the riders in that team, in that 30 rider setup, they pick them on numbers and what they can produce, watts wise, and all that. But a lot of these guys aren't born natural racers. You just put them on the front, ride at this speed, like robots. You become a robot. Whereas Mark's a racer, and this is Cav's words. This is why the pro peloton has become so dangerous, and there's so many crashes everywhere. Is a lot of these guys aren't great bike riders or handlers, if you know what I mean. They're big, strong engines, and they can produce the watts, and they can do what you want them to do. But it's become very mechanized, the sport, hasn't it? And the fluidity of bike races and people flicking this and doing this, that's going from the sport a little bit.
I always compare when I look at maybe because of the dynamics of the race, when you look at the British road race champs, and maybe because of the team setup, you look at that's very much what I call an old school race, where the teams are small, so it's not quite every man for himself, but it's a brutal hard race, but tactically driven. And you look at Mark as an example where he's always up the front end of that race, because it's what I call old school racing. And he's up the front with he's obviously pro level, or skirted around the edges of it, but full time, long in year out pros, and he's in there, and it's that. It's quite interesting because it has lost that. That edge. And then so early on you mentioned about Jeff Wine. I want to chat a bit about him and.
I'd love to. What a dear friend Jeff was all his life. From taking me away to my first ever race, I suppose.
Was he a biker back in the day?
No, he's never been a cyclist. No. He had he was born on the Isle of Man. He moved away to Canada. He was married to Florence. Moved away to Canada. Had his lads, Kevin and Michael, and I think Florence fell ill, so he came back to the island. But he put so much into cycling. His two sons, they lived in Laxey at the time, and his two sons rode bikes from the age of 9, I think they were. and they'd ride into Douglas, race and ride home at 9. You know, you look at that now, it's incredible, isn't it? And I befriended Mike when we were probably early teens, and we raced, even as 2 junior riders, we'd travel around to Ireland together, we'd race in races of just the pair of us would just take off. We rode the Junior Tour of Ireland together one year, just the pair of us went and entered it, raced it. You know, with nothing, you know, sleeping in a school and all that sort of stuff. But Jeff was, Jeff's wife died, and then Jeff worked on the boat as a purser for a while, throughout the steam packet, Sea Link, Manx Line, all these other companies that came in and out of the Isle of Man over the years. But he was fantastic for us. If we were going away, I'll never forget this one little story. I was sleeping down at Mike's house one night. We were probably 17, I'd say, going away to race in Merseyside, like we did every weekend. We'd go away, and the phone would be ringing in the house. No mobiles in these days, and Jeff would be on the phone. Where are you? I pretended the doors jammed at the back, and we'd overslept, and we weren't on the boat, so we were flat out down Woodburn Road with a bag on our back to get to the boat, and Jeff had to pretend that there was a problem with the door, and we were straight down on the boat.
Close the boat up and away.
Yeah. And they were great stories from when we were kids. But as time went on, Jeff moved around the island, and he set up camp base down here, really, in Ballasalla, just around the corner from where you are. And I think Mike Doyle approached him to see, because he was such a great ambassador for the sport, Jeff. But you see, would we welcome us into his house on a Wednesday? He said he'd love to do that. So the first Wednesday few went down, and more, and it became the tradition. It was Jeff's ride on a Wednesday, same route every Wednesday, bit of a recovery ride, bit of a laugh. Bought Jeff an urn, a big heavy duty toaster, and he changed the name of his front room to Ballasalla Tea Room, so we'd all go down there, and if it was raining, we'd just drive down. So, and as time went on, everybody was turning up at Jeff's. Where Cav was home and all these people were home, they'd come in. Cal Crutchlow, when he was home, Jeff loved motorsport. So if he's got Cal Crutchlow in his house and all these people, he was just loving it. He was living the dream. And he was an older guy by this stage, late 70s, you know. He won't mind me saying he was a little bit dishevelled. You know, he'd have egg on his shirt and his hairs would be sticking out. But as Jeff lived like Jeff lived. But we loved him. And then, unfortunately, when he was 81, he passed. He had just walked to the shop, came home, collapsed and died. But I remember before that, 2 or 3 years before that, I always used to pop in and see him. And he'd said to me, when I die, Burgers, will you do a eulogy at my funeral? And I thought, well, I've only come to watch the Formula 1 with you, Jeff. Yeah, of course I'd be honoured, but come on, let's get the kettle on. And I never said it. He only wrote it in his will, didn't he? So I had to do the eulogy at his funeral. So I was dead proud to do it, you know. And the church around the corner he had, it must have had 400 people in it. It was chocker, you know. And a nicer guy you couldn't have wished to meet, and very
memorial ride that goes on now.
In memory of Jeff, and we used to pay for his ticket and bring him as a guest to the dinner every year. And he wasn't a sponsor, he wasn't a great rider, but we knew what he meant to the sport, so we'd buy his ticket and bring him to the dinner.
Very nice.
No, it was great. What a great guy. What a great guy. Just briefly, I know because you probably you've talked about Christian. We briefly touched on Christian and how key he was to our sport when he was younger. And I've known Christian since he was a kid. I've been like an uncle to him, really.
Yeah, because I work with his old man.
Yeah, I worked with his dad, Tony, and you know, Christian's had his troubles, but what he achieved by doing them 90 marathons, what you guys did for him as well, was just unbelievable.
He did the running.
Yeah, well, he did the running, we did the talking, but it was just great, and he's a dear friend of mine, and I always felt like I wanted to mention him. You know, I'm so proud of what he's done and how he's moved on, and he's getting through life, and you know, he.
In fact, I was kind of almost, I suppose the word's proud of him that he's willing to sort of face those and talk about those problems. When we first talked about getting him on the podcast, he was he was reluctant. We recorded one. He wasn't, you know, he was like, you know, was that the right thing to do? And it took a lot of balls for him to talk about it, a lot of balls. And I know a lot of people have reached out to him and have said, you know, can I go for coffee with you?
Yeah.
What you go through, I do, and I just don't know who to talk to about it. Just to do what he does. I still don't think he maybe appreciates the impact he had on people. I really don't. It's kind of like, whatever, you know, I just need to go and run. 3 days later, he's running another marathon.
Well, you're right, and one thing I've wrote down here is that cycling for me even as you go through later life. And I'm not involved in competitive sport anymore. You know, I have a look at it now and again, but time's moved on. I can walk into a change room, nobody even know who I am now. So, which is fine. Yeah, times move on, don't they? And it needed to move on. But riding a bike is like a form of therapy now to everybody, I think. You must agree yourself. We can all go through dark times in our life, various things that we're not coping with, and you notice it if you don't ride your bike or do any other sporting activity. If you don't do it for 2 weeks, you can feel 2 days. Yeah, feel yourself going downhill a bit, can't you? You know, and other people that have never been cyclists, and cycling's such a huge thing on the Isle of Man now. Riding a bike isn't it? Whether it's an e-bike, if you're going into the mountains, or you're going out with your family, whatever it is, it's given people this unbelievable lease of life, and people are wondering why they've never done it before, because the feel-good factor is just unbelievable.
I think I see that with, but sort of certainly when I was racing in the early 90s, biking, they were odd. But that's why I asked about earlier at the start there, when you went racing down the bowl, if many people were there, because certainly in my era, when I first started racing as a schoolboy, there was like 5, 6 of us racing.
Yeah, it went through lean times.
Yeah, and it was that kind of weird sport that no one did, and it's so nice to see that people, you know, that aren't bikers, but just like you say, getting an e-bike, going out on a bike. I've seen places that, you know, they'd be talking about hills, and you'd be like, yeah, I know that area, and they've never been there on the Isle of Man, just because it's off the main road.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good to see. I want to go back a little bit, actually, and not to dig into us, but again, you talked about this dream of having a bike shop. How did that eventually come about?
Mid-90s, I suppose. A couple of reasons why I wanted to do it, which I won't go into, but you know, a couple of friends of mine I'd recommended to go somewhere, and they weren't treated very well, and etc. And I just thought, well, no, there's got to be a better way of doing this. So I made a few inquiries. I had one thing you do in sport, when you've been in a sport as long as I have, you've networked with a lot of people when we were racing away or whatever. And cyclists are notorious for staying involved in the sport, whether they become working for companies and reps or they own bike shops or whatever they do. You don't fall far from the tree, do you? You know, you're only round the corner really. So I made a few inquiries, went away, tried to get some dealerships. I could get them. I didn't have any money at this stage, but my
Details.
Well, a very good friend of mine, has been mentioned earlier on this podcast, lent me a little bit of money, but I still needed a partner because I was still in the fire service, and I had to, in a funny sort of way, I had to manipulate that a little bit, because you weren't allowed to be a director of a business or anything when you were in it. So I just became a shareholder. Let's go over the rest.
Yeah.
I had a bit of some debates, but anyway, the dream happened, and got involved.
So that was obviously bike style.
Yeah, that was bike style in them days. So myself and Terry Quayle became partners, and his son Gavin, who's now the owner of it. Gavin came on board quite shortly after, and really we worked together for a number of years. But I suppose as you get older, you just, I'm a very driven person, and I like to try and achieve things, whether it's right or wrong. I don't feel like if I haven't tried, then I would always be thinking, what if? So that, Elliot Baxter came and worked with us for a while, who's been a lifelong friend of mine. But it got to a stage, I think, that we just wanted different things really. So we parted our ways, and I didn't do anything for a little bit. To be fair, I was finishing my fire service career. Had a bad accident in Portugal in a mountain bike event, which changed my life a little bit really. It sent me to a bit of a dark place, because I'd come out of the emergency services, so a 30-year career of having a buzz and having this, that and the other. I had a little bit of a sketchy life plan. By this stage I'd become a run leader and was working on training camps in Mallorca. I was quite well respected out there, knew the place like the back of my hand.
So taking bike rides out.
Yeah, taking bike rides out, but also putting a bit of structure to it as well. So, and I loved that, absolutely loved it. So I had a bit of a thing lined up there. I would be doing sort of 4 or 5 months in Mallorca really, if I could get away with it. And I had a little part-time job lined up here, and then that was my life. But I'd got myself quite fit again. Doing 500 miles a week in Mallorca sort of helped with that. It sort of knocked some of the lumps into different places. Can't get rid of them forever, but they do move. So me and a friend had set about entered the Trans Portugal, which is an 8-day endurance mountain bike event. around 150k a day,
Yeah.
all off road, so 10-hour days basically. But I had a bad accident there, and on one of the stages, and I landed on my left arm and smashed it into 5, me ulna, and then I dislocated my elbow, and it completely articulated the other way, which ripped all the ligaments off and snapped the head off the radius bone. So I was lying there, sort of taken to hospital. I was a week in hospital in Portugal, and then repatriated back home, and then 4 or 5 years of surgery since, really.
Right.
So I was told I'd never ride a bike again, and I'd never be a fireman again, and all that sort of stuff.
Oh,
But
right.
I'd left the whole time fire service anyway, but I was still part-time.
Right.
I'd kept my rank, and I was going to stay just a retained fireman in Douglas, and I loved that. It was good.
And sorry, just then that news, no bike, no fire service. When we talk about, I guess, going back to identity and everything like that,
Yeah, yeah.
how did you feel hearing that
Not
news?
good. Not good. Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
You call on some deep reserves, really, I think. Did a lot of walking.
Right.
Went for a bit of help.
Right. Do you have family and friends around you as well?
Yeah.
Are you one for talking about it with them? Or would you keep a lot of being I say being a man, but a lot of men, we're all like that. We don't talk about emotions too much.
I did to an extent.
Yeah.
And I'd done a little bit of work with that in the fire service. I worked on a trauma support team within the fire service, and
so you kind of see signs of this is
something's not right.
Not good behaviour.
Well, you were lost all of a sudden.
Right.
You know, as you say, your identity's gone, but you had an attachment to, even if you've come out of an emergency service, which is hard enough in its own right. I mean, when you've lived and breathed something for 30 years. So then the little bit you were turning to was that's been taken away from you, and I nearly lost my arm. So it was a bit of a battle, really. But I set myself goals, and even though you come out of the fire service, there's a support structure there. So I was in a rehab centre in Penrith 2 or 3 times, and but then it's rehab for physical, but it's mental as well. That helped for me massively.
I mean, you well, I suppose I haven't been through that trauma side of things, because again, just observations, and certainly maybe more, I don't use the word old school of gentlemen, but just you got to man up and get on with it. But no, I'm sure you've seen that through the fire service.
I have, but the times have changed, and for the better, without a doubt.
100%.
People have got to talk.
And
which is why I had such an endearing link with Christian, really.
Right, okay, yeah, I can relate to.
There was a little piece in the middle of there that I missed on that. I opened Starbucks in Douglas.
I've just written a note.
For a friend of mine, Ian Morrow, who's the
I wrote Costa,
Ian, thank you for that. Well, it was over a beer one night, and he'd asked me would I manage this thing for him, and I didn't really give it enough thought, and said, that sounds like it'd be a bit of a laugh. I'll have a go at that. So I did all the training. I went away to Manchester, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that bit of banter. It was great, but I was in Manchester in a Starbucks managing a store in Piccadilly, and in walked Christian, the last person in the world I'd expect to see, and I was certainly the last person he'd expect to see, because the last time he'd see me I was his manager at the fire station. So he must have looked at me and thought, Burgers has got a doppelganger here, what's going on here? And I give him a shout, and I said, I'll sort something out, I'll come over and sit with you. And Christian had just come out of his rehab then, so we openly talked. I said, listen, I'll take you for tea tonight, so we'll go out for tea. And we went and had something to eat, because Christian didn't have anything, and he was just starting life again, really. So I took him for tea, and we went to the comedy club and tried to have a laugh, and there was nothing else involved. So it was good, it was clean, it was fresh, and I think we did it again. And then he was going for interviews and different bits and pieces. So, I can relate massively to Christian.
Yeah,
massively.
That it's interesting that the Starbucks, again, I guess that drive side, isn't it? Of here's something exciting, new.
And like you said, it's an identity, isn't it? It's something. Somebody's got some faith in you and want you to do something. But it didn't suit me at all, and it was very difficult to go from, I don't know, being a ranked officer in an emergency service where you have a sense of belonging and you are somebody and you turn up and you're there to help people and you're good at your job. I was good at my job, so to go into being just what the general public think is just a bloke in a cafe. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sometimes you get spoke to not the best, and nobody speaks to you like that in the phone. Only your mates.
Yeah.
But the general
It's
public respect you, and they're made up to see you. But in places like that, it's different. It's a different culture, different world, and I struggle to adapt to it really.
Right.
I say, but I guess like similar to what you said before is that you want to give those things a go to say what if it could have worked. You know, it's just
Yeah,
quite
you don't
quite
know
right.
until
It
you
could have
do it,
worked,
do you?
or similarly maybe just wasn't.
And
for
I
the-
actually learned a lot. You know, I like learning things. It's great. I struggle with certain IT stuff, to be fair, but it's hard for the young people now to realise that there wasn't even a computer at school when we were there. So and people laugh. I was having a laugh last night when I put a DVD in to watch because I couldn't get it on Netflix or on Prime, but I've got it on a DVD. And I said the youth now would laugh their head off when they see a shelf opening up in something. They say, "Well, why don't you just play it off your phone?"
Yeah.
It's different.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So you
yeah,
start,
so
so started to then, you mentioned before about kind of doing your term in regard to helping cycling, working in cycling. When that came to an end, was that around the time of the crash?
no, I'd already made a decision. I think going to the games in Edinburgh in Glasgow, sorry, in 2014 when it was probably Roach's last games. Peter was riding. Cav was injured after his crash in Harrogate, I think, and he couldn't ride, but he came up anyway. In my head, I thought I've done my time here. You know, I've moved on a generation, and half of these people that are coming in now don't even think you've ever rode a bike. Don't think you know anything about anything. And it's fair to say some people can speak to you not appropriately. Younger riders, good riders as well, and I didn't like it really. So, and I thought I've done 20 years of this at huge sacrifice to my own personal life, to relationships, to your family. So
Time was
enough. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And were you at this stage? Were you still riding a bike and keeping fit? And
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And
I'd still go out. We'd still have our kit on. I'd go out with the team. We'd ride.
They'd wait for you.
Yeah. Certainly if it went uphill.
They'd wait at the calf for it.
I was all right down.
All right. Yeah. So since then, you've, although you're kind of, I call peripheral around the sport, you're quite, and rightly so, quite content not to get knee deep in stuff again.
Yeah, no, I can do some things, and I choose not to do them really.
Yeah.
So I needed that separation really for a couple of years, and then which I got. I never went to a bike race. I never, and then I remember riding out to a 25 presentation in Ballaugh, and I think I walked in and nobody even said hello, and I thought that time is gone. I mean the lads were there, Sconnor and Johnny and all the boys were there. You would be there, but everybody gets involved. Yeah, everybody's busy doing in the sport, aren't they? So when you take a step back and you look at it from the outside, it's a bit different now, I think.
Right.
I think the sport's changed. We've got unbelievable talent over here. Still, it just keeps on going, doesn't it? And it's the achievements of the lads, Max and all them boys now. It's just phenomenal. It's great, and the women have just been unbelievable. And it's great to read it all but I don't want to get involved with it.
Those early years when you stepped away, did you find it hard to look inwards? Certainly when I stopped.
I didn't even look in, to be fair.
No, all right. But that was a conscious decision of.
Well, no, I didn't. It just didn't bother me.
Right.
I didn't. I'd gone down this other road, and then I'd had my injury, and then I thought, I don't know. I was dealing with stuff myself, I didn't want to be going out to bike races and stuff.
So I suppose one of the we should have talked before we start recording this, but obviously you ended up working in 360 as a general public. People look back, you owned a bike shop, and arguably people would just look and move to a competitor. I think the reality is we've all got to earn a job, and it's not we're not living in a
wasn't quite
hookup.
like that.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure, and that's why I just want to chat about your
Yeah.
perspective of things, really.
When I wasn't working for a little while, and I was quite happy. I've got my fire service pension and bits and pieces. So, but you still need a belonging. You still need it. You got to get up with a purpose to the day, and you can't just ride going. I'm only I'm 57 now, so it's too young to do nothing. And I'm a driven person, and I've got a strong work ethic, so I like doing things. And then I got this phone call one day out of the blue from Mark and Peter Hosthouse they had been working on something for 4 years and wanted to know. They were talking to key people within the sport of cycling just to get some feedback on whether they think it was a viable concept or what they thought. And I sat down and looked at the whole thing, and I was blown away, if I'm honest with you. I just thought this is everything I'd always want to do, but to the normal person, the average person, it's just beyond you know, your resources. certainly beyond my budget, yeah, without a doubt. So, but what an unbelievable vision, you know. So Mark and Sasha have had this vision to do it. Peter's on board with the whole thing and supporting his son all the way, and it's just fantastic, you know. So I got involved at a very early stage. I still had a lot of contacts away, so I still knew where we can get different things from, and different companies, and me and Mark went to a bike show, and it's great when people shout your name when you're walking past because they remember you. Oh, what you up to these days? And I said, well, if you've got 5 minutes, let us run through things. So so before you know it, a number of, without going to the ins and outs of more, but a number of big companies have come on board, and as it's self-perpetuating, it's grown. It's forever changing. I love the fact that
don't stand still.
Yeah,
that's the impression I
yeah,
get.
they're not standing still, and there's about 5 projects on the go at the moment. You know, when we open our new service centre, which is where our store is, because it's just so busy. So, and as we touched on before, everybody's riding bikes with COVID-19 kicking in, which I know we haven't touched on, but everybody's had to reinvent themselves a little bit, really, and have a quick look at life's priorities. And, you know, what are you in life if you haven't got your health? You're nothing, are you? You can have all the money in the world and be the unhappiest man in the world. And this is why we touched on therapy and riding your bike before. And people are now realising the health benefits, psychological benefits of being fit and healthy and outdoors. So
it's the first thing they really said when lockdown came, wasn't it? It was, you know, they said one thing you can go out for is your exercise. So, you know,
there was a fine line, wasn't it? All your mates were lovely and tanned and brown lying in the garden, and you were as white as a ghost working 10 hours a day in the bike business.
Busy.
But it's grown, and you know, all the bike shops in the islands will have flourished, and you've got to grasp onto that and capture it while it's there and move forward. So,
and do you work up there a few days a week?
I'm full time. I manage the bike shop side of it. I've been there from the start. So, and we're growing a really good team.
Right. Good.
And I can't see it slowing down at the moment, really. You know, I'll slow down, certainly. Probably. Maybe in 8-9 months' time, I'll need to drop a day a week. Right. But I love it. It's a great team. The people that work there are just fun. They're good. I'm like a granddad, really, aren't I? So, but they keep you young, don't they? Young people keep you young. Old people keep you old. So don't knock about with me.
And I know in the more recent time you moved back up to Ramsey. Yeah.
Well, I've never lived in Ramsey. Right. I know you say back up to Ramsey. Everybody thinks that, because it's a mad thing, and you mentioned it before the show. But when I was young and at school, I was quite I played a lot of rugby. So I was captain of the rugby team at Ballacamina and at St Ninians, and then I never played really because I was a cyclist. But a friend of mine, Ian Gale, phoned me up when I was 21, I think, to say, could I come and play fullback for Peel, because their fullback had broken wrist. They didn't have anyone to play. So I went. I didn't have any kit, and I went out and I had an absolute ball. I loved it, and it was a different feeling of elation. If you win a game as a team, it's a bit different to winning it on your own. Two different sides of it. Rugby at the time, rugby didn't have a great training ethic compared with cycling. You have to train 5 days a week, don't you? And you have to. If you take 1 day off, it takes you 2 days to get back to where you were. So I just loved it, and then within 2 years I'd gone to play at Ramsey. I loved the lads up there. They were all good fun. They were all young. They were all, well, at the time, my age. And I just had it always had this massive, strong sense of community up there. I loved the way when the lads talked about their youth compared with growing up in Onken and Douglas. Their youthful side was bombing around fields in cars that they'd managed to get going on a farm, you know what I mean, and going shooting rabbits and all the things they do in the country compared to what you do in a town. And I just loved that banter and that talk, and always stayed friends with them. I played up there for 25 years. Two of the worst sports to put together, rugby and cycling, ever do it. I'd have to go on the rollers after playing a game of rugby and having probably 4 or 5 beers, and then going on the rollers when I got home to make my legs work, ready to go out in a club run the next day. But I did it and I loved it. And to be fair, some of my strongest friendship groups are still there in that.
Hence
Whereas
the movement.
cycling, you don't. If you didn't keep involved with the riders I was taking away all them years, you wouldn't hear from them.
Yeah.
But with that you do. So it's the community thing really.
Yeah, yeah. And that was one of the drivers for going that way.
Oh,
to
absolutely.
see
Well,
the
that
mates
and I didn't want. For me, the Roon and Douglas slowly year on year, and you can't park. I couldn't park near my house. You can't park anywhere in town. The businesses are closing, and they can't see what they're doing down there. I can't believe it. But I wanted to go somewhere. I wanted to be in a house that was manageable over the next 10 years. I wanted to be able to paint it off a normal ladder. I wanted to be able to park on my own drive. I wanted a view of the mountains. I wanted to walk into town and have a coffee or a beer. And that's all I wanted to do. And I go out on my bike straight out and I'm in the country. And I love it. I love it.
When you look back at sporting memories for you, I suppose twofold question. One, for sort of the proudest aspect from looking at someone else's achievements, and then maybe your own as well.
Well, I wasn't a great cyclist, so I built some great friends, and they're still my friends now. And
So that's I suppose an achievement.
Well, I rode in 2 Commonwealth Games. I was made up to
yeah.
do that and represent the island. I made my parents proud and made my friends proud, and had a few good wins in Cycle Week. But they're only at my level, I love Peel Comess. That was great. I won about 5 times
the
around
streets,
there. I used to love the Comesses. Peel, Doug Castletown. I won all them Comesses, and as you say, the Kerwins and stuff. But getting through the RAS and winning bunch sprints in these places, and it all builds that little picture. But as far as managing, strong emotions over different things. Holding Roach in your arms when he's crashed in the Kuala Lumpur time trial and he's a broken man. When he wanted to try and medal in it, or I couldn't even talk when Cav won his gold in 2006. I remember Tim Glover coming up and wanting to interview me. I said, I can't talk. I'm too emotional. Don't talk to me. I can't talk. I was more upset than Cav was. But like Roachy talked on his podcast, when you do what we do and manage teams and take people away, you can't do it for them. You've got to do it for you, because I got everything out of that. At that stage of my life, it made me tick and it made me proud. And you're part of a team of guys who are having fun. You've got to have fun wherever you go. You've got to have a laugh. Take the mickey, a bit of banter. Sometimes that's going now. I know, because one of my friends has taken the team away and they're on their phones all the time, and it's all changed that. The old-fashioned humour and banter and mickey taking.
It feels like camaraderie and that.
Absolutely
building
does.
as well, doesn't it?
Laughing at other people's misfortunes.
It's funny you mention Alec Forrest earlier. It's a name I've again not heard for a long while, but again a member of the. When you look at talking earlier about people we want to chat to as well about who do grassroots stuff, and Alec was one of them.
Absolutely.
Kids, Lincoln and
Brian.
And they raced, and I remember Alex taking me away. I remember you and Alex taking us away racing to Essex and coming back to Lancaster and having the van broken into. We parked in the car park and had all our bags nicked. But just memory stories, and another one I'm going with. We talk about. I'm sure you'll appreciate talking about Paco and going away to the Essex. And you rented a farmhouse we stayed in.
It was a pig barn.
Well, yeah. Well, no, it wasn't the second year. It was converted pig barn where it was rooms. The first year, wasn't it a house because there was no hot water? I think Paco was shaving.
It was cheap.
Yeah, Paco was shaving his legs in the bath. It looked like a murder scene when he finished in there.
Paco, he's missed really. He was a bizarre character, Tony, wasn't he? But he brought so much fun to everything. You're right, that was like a murder scene because he'd shaved instead of shaving his legs all, you just decided to shave him the night before the race and cut himself to pieces, and it looked like it was a bloodbath.
Yeah, it did look like a.
But the other thing I remember about Tony really well was that we were at the Island Games in Jersey in the late 90s, I think it was.
97, yeah.
And he had blocked sinuses.
Andy
Rhodes would laugh at this. So we said, well, listen, there's only one answer for that. Surely you've heard of it. He says, what's that? He said, well, you've got to hang your head upside down and put warm salt water up one nostril.
And don't move.
Don't move. So we hung him out the window. Got this hot salt water, put it up his nostril. Well, I'm still laughing now. You've never seen anything like it in your life. Half of his innards came out. Oh, it was hilarious, honestly. And his nose was worse.
Full of water, that's why.
Full of water and
snot.
sinus problems, But just a lot, just fun, and we had so much fun all the way through. I know one thing that we haven't touched on is one thing about me is I'm a bit of a traditionalist. I like tradition. I love old-fashioned tradition stuff, and the only thing now I do in cycling is organise the Baltic ride, which goes back to when I was 15. I can remember, I think it started 10 or 15 years beforehand when a group of cyclists were out on a bike ride out around Peel on a Wednesday night, and the weather turned foul really, really bad, and they dived into the Hawthorn for shelter on a Wednesday before Christmas, and they didn't realise it, but it was the Hawthorn ladies women's darts team Christmas do, and before you know it, I think there was Nick Corkle, Colin Bowen, these might be names you might have heard of, Rob Rohrer, and they ended up having a few beers and joining in with the women and having such a great night that the following year they purposely went on a bike ride to join in with the. And I think even Brian Roach might have been the landlord of the Hawthorn at the time. He might not have been, I'm not too sure on facts. But this carried on for years and years and years and grew into this Hawthorn run that I went on when I was 15 for the first time. But no money, none of us had money, did we? But the old fellas wanted you there, and they'd always buy you a pint, and we'd make our way home safe and sound as usual, but in all sorts of things. But this carried on for years and years and years and years, and all them original guys have passed away now. Colin Bowen, I'm not sure where Mick Watson is, but certainly Nick Corkle, who was a dear friend of mine and a good coach to me when I was younger as well, and I really, really miss Nick. And it moved to the Farmers Arms, and now it goes to the Baltic, and it's grown in it's now a carol service. People go off-road there. They set up a temporary little water hole, for want of a better term, in Arch Alligan with battery operated fairy lights, and the whole thing is great, and I've not missed one since I was 15, so this is my 43rd this year.
Yeah, so that will be 22nd of December, I guess, this year.
16th it is this year.
Oh, the week before,
it's
right.
too close to Christmas. You won't get away with it with your missus.
Okay, right, so the week before.
But that's the only thing I'm traditionally involved in now, but I'll do it until I can't do it.
Head to the Baltic.
Last year was a Storm Force 9 from Ramsey, and I still got there.
Right, okay, right.
Yeah.
And I've done that when it was in the Hawthorn days, a couple of those Hawthorn rides. Back to Studebakers after, because it was back then.
That's another name I haven't heard for a while. Studebakers, yeah.
Oh, with Jameson, the Jameson brothers, those boys. Are names that just come back now.
I just remembered that then. I thought, well, I better stick it in.
If you mentioned earlier about Jeff, and if somebody was doing your eulogy, what would you expect someone to talk about you about?
I'd write
a friend.
I think I'd write it.
Start with the Kerwins.
And end with it, yeah. I don't know.
What would you like people to think of you?
That's a difficult one, isn't it? I really don't know.
I get the impression you care.
Yeah, I do care. With it, your family, your career,
Do you still see the Farming Boys?
Oh yeah, regularly, yeah.
I'd imagine that's much like a brotherhood type of thing. Yeah.
We were out last Wednesday afternoon, actually. We have an autumn do.
Oh, right, okay.
Well, Big H comes out with us in his chair, and we have a do. We've got Sconner's organising the Christmas one.
All right, okay.
So God knows what'll happen. Be the wrong venue at the wrong time.
Yeah, if you can make a decision.
We love Sconner. He's great. But yeah, that's down Castletown at Christmas. So yeah, see a lot of them. I've always been a cyclist all my life. So whether now I'm just involved with the Ramsey Scon run. So we go out on a Wednesday morning and a Saturday morning. I'm generally on the front, but only purely because my vision's not the best anymore. I've early stages of glaucoma, so that affects your vision a little bit. But plus, I can't afford to hit a pothole. So if some inexperienced rider on the front doesn't point them out and I hit it, my arm is killing me. So.
Okay.
So
jarring of it.
But you can control the pace and make it quite. In the summer we'll be riding at 18 or 19 mile an hour, and in the winter we'll be dropping to 17ish. So, but it's good and everybody enjoys it. We split it into two groups, and then it's just a banter and Mickey take, and that's what I love. I always think the day you stop laughing is the day you stop living. That's what we wrote on my headstone.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a sort of a abiding memory. Again, I go back talking earlier about going away racing. That it was always good fun. It was when we needed to race, we raced. There was always a discussion of. I remember being at my first games. You were the team manager there. it'd be a lot of fun. And when the time, I remember before the crit, which was my first kind of big race really at the Island Games, and you could I guess looking back, you could probably tell I wasn't in a great place in regard to nerves and whatever, and it was just a quiet word.
Yeah.
And where somebody else might have been getting a different approach.
I always think
it was always fun throughout the going away. It was just a laugh. It was
and it's identifying that in people. I think you've got to do that in life. If you can identify in people, we did it in the fire service a lot. Certain people had a lot of good strengths, and other people's weaknesses. And it's moulding that. But just having a quiet word if somebody needs it, and that's why I got involved with trauma support after incidents. You could tell if somebody was affected by something, and just trying to help them get through some stuff, or doing psychological debriefs, etc. So I think subconsciously had an interest in that, and I think with cycling, there's a lot of people just need a bit of self-belief, and but we always had fun. But I'm always a believer, if you're good at what you do, if you put your best into something, then you can have the fun after, can't you? And you can have the Mickey taken on the way home. And at the end of the day, we're not making money out of this, are we? So let's enjoy it, because it can come too serious sometimes. You do all your training, and everybody is going as best as they can do, and if everybody rides for each other and looks out for each other, then we can have the crack later on, and that goes throughout life. I think we have some banter on our rides, and we've got another little rugby club type thing I go out with on a Thursday night. They're just guys I played rugby with or grew up with in a different aspect, but we got on a bike. So we've got we'll do 25 mile on a Thursday night and then go to the pub. But it's fun. It's Mickey taken, and I never laugh so much for 2 hours every Thursday. And it's all about making life as good and as it can be, and the bike has been that mechanism for me to be able to do that, I suppose.
You mentioned maybe next year or later in the year, or next year now, I guess, going down a day. What's your kind of hopes over the next, because you're still around 58, it's not old.
No.
What are your plans?
I don't know really. I've got a.
You always live here?
He's nigh. Oh yeah, yeah. At one stage I thought I'd have a base in Mallorca, but having been there when my arm was smashed up and couldn't ride my bike, it brings a different. It's a lonely place, You need your friends.
Well, I wonder whether you've just got your network in Mallorca, which was your cycling guys. I wonder if you actually bedded down there and you were going to local coffee shops and started meeting.
Well, I know a lot of people that live there,
right.
But it's not for me. Okay. I think if I went, I'm getting too old for that now, but I'd still go back and still go out for a month or so and ride there, and I love that. But I've got such a great network of friends over here that I don't need much else, and you've got, in fact, there's too many. Sometimes you get too many friends. You can't do everything, can you? So it's good. Life's good at the moment, really. I mean, grandson's 8, young Bobby. He's 9 tomorrow, and he's doing everything. He's a bit like me. I mean, he plays rugby at Douglas. He's Onken under 10's goalkeeper, and he races down the sports centre, and he's trying to juggle everything. But he's, if you pick him up from school, all the kids are shouting, Bobby's here tomorrow, and that's the most important thing for me. He's accepted, and he's good fun, and everybody loves him. So
you're on granddad duties.
Granddad duties, yeah. Right. I said, just don't call me granddad.
To call you Burgers.
Burgers. Because I'm picking him up, and my mates are picking their kids up, and they're the same age as me.
Uncle Gary. Thanks for coming in. It's been good to chat and reminisce. I don't know. I think I just kind of, when you were chatting, when we were talking about stepping away from cycling, this isn't to make you feel guilty, but you always, when someone's so passionate about the sport, their heart's in the right place to do the right things, it's quite hard to see them not be involved. Again, if someone who's involved in cycling, you're like, here's someone who can add value.
Yeah.
But I also understand if you've done...
because I've had that time away.
Yeah,
so,
I guess, yeah.
I think I've got maybe something else to offer on a more strategic level, not the personal level. I think you become too old for it, and I'm not an old man, and I've got a really young outlook on life. But I think that hands-on stuff that Rochi's doing now is great, and he's got that wealth of respect for being a brilliant bike rider. So he's going to do that. But I think there's something missing above it. I think there's some more work needs to be. To me, looking at it from an outside, we used to have some big grand dinners, and we'd have 250 people. We were sold out within 2 weeks. We had proper big guests of honours coming over. and our sport was up here.
Yeah.
And at the moment, it's up here performance-wise, but where's everything else that supports that? It doesn't seem to be there. And I look at a lot of these riders now and it's great watching the likes of the Mazzoni boys doing well, etc. But they're not earning any money out of it. And at some stage or other, something's going to come to an end. And when they struggle to adjust to coming back to actually doing this. And I think Roche adapted really well. And I listened intently to Roche's podcast. You know, when he came back, he struggled. Because from being a pro bike rider at potentially world level and having to make them decisions whether to go down that road that was ahead of him or not, he came back. And I remember having a conversation with his dad about it. You know, and he had so much to offer, and he couldn't walk away from it all. And when nobody wanted him to, and he didn't. Thank God he didn't, because you can still have a great cycling career but not be at world level. You know, these guys playing Sunday League football have a great time, don't they? They're not playing Premiership, they're not playing Championship. And we as an Isle of Man team, with the belief and with the backing and the structure and the support, should be competing at national and Irish level, a number of stage races a year, Premier calendar level, etc., etc. Put a decent run of 10 or 12 events in a year and have something to aim for, and capture all these Nathan Drapers and all these other people that were. You know, Nathan was 8th in the Junior World Championships, and now he's playing football from round. And he's a young lad. And all these other guys that come out of the sport, there's just nothing for them. There's no umbrella to catch them all and take them on another journey that's not as severe. They can still work. All of us worked when we were young and had a great time. And there are memories now.
And it's funny you talk about Andrew as well, because then keeping in the sport, and he's kept in there, and now, he's now really started a women's team from scratch, and the value he's bringing to the sport at a later date as well. So they're also not lost on that level as well from that support, whether it's just helping out or to what Andrew's doing now in regard to in general the cycling men and women, but particularly the women. That wouldn't be anywhere near where it is now. It was, so we'd have lost him to the sport at 22. That just wouldn't be happening now.
No.
So that value in keeping them around.
And that's up to some of us to do that, isn't it?
I guess.
You know, I'd love to get back involved, and I've even talked about certainly Island Games anyway, at a more strategic level. And I wrote the bylaws for the Island Games cycling all them years ago, and how it's structured and distance of races, what order to have them in, all from experience. Yeah.
Well, that's again, you look back at 30 years of experience that you feel like.
And that's why in anything I struggle where people are allowed to walk away. You know, if I had a business and had a guy working in that business for 30 years and he just handed his notice in, and you said, "All right, thanks very much," you could work a month and you go out the door. You'd want to know why, wouldn't you? I'd want to know why. What's brought him to that decision? Is there something I've missed? Is there something I haven't picked up on? And go and have a coffee and have a chat. But I mean, it happens in the fire service. People hand their notes and walk out the door, and they're letting them. I don't get it. And it happens in life that, and you spend your whole life building experience, which has a value. You're a valuable asset to whatever whatever you are involved in.
Well, that's why I brought the comment, because that's what I see. Not that whether that's your own choice, or whatever, but that not having that involvement is just a detriment to.
But I'd get involved again.
Could you need Marshall on the weekend?
Due
rain all day. 3 hours on the corner. No, thanks for coming in.
No, thanks for having me. It's nice to talk about all this sort of stuff, isn't it?
No, likewise.
Close to tears sometimes, but it's you manage to hold it back.
Do you want to check us out, Matt?
Yeah, so wherever you're listening or potentially watching today, please like, share, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review. Pretty please. Social media, Facebook, We're the M-Word Podcast, Twitter, Manx Word Podcast for the number 1, and Instagram, we are the M-Word IOM.
Super. Thanks for listening, you sexy people. It's word out from Martin.
And word out from Matt.
And goodbye from Gary.
And goodbye from Gary. Goodbye, Gary.
Screw you guys, I'm going.